let's force ourselves to do something hard and uncomfortable every single day just so we get a little bit stronger, right? This is the problem with all these youngins right now, is the thing is their philosophy is I need the world to change so I don't feel the impact of the world. That's one strategy. Another strategy is, dude, the world's the world. You got to get a little bit tougher. You got to get better schools. You got to thicken your skin up a little bit, but without losing the ability to love and be compassionate.
Oh, I was going to argue with you about, you said that Da Vinci was the best, the greatest inventor ever.
Yeah,
A
I
good
mean, what's your,
choice. Good choice. So this
I
was
mean, go ahead and try it.
in reference to Toastmasters, who was the greatest inventor. I think it was the question that you got.
Yes, the greatest inventor of all time. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, who's the
my first thought was Newton,
Sir Isaac Newton?
and I would
I
and the logic I had was, can I consider discovering or creating, physics, the laws of physics, the laws of motion? Did he discover them? Did he create them? Did he, and then is that an invention or is that not? You could argue that
well,
point.
so I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and he discovered them. He didn't invent them, and I'll tell you why. If he wouldn't have discovered them, somebody else would have. Eventually, they would have been discovered. So they're different than art. Creating something like, let's
You
say,
could
the Mona
argue the
Lisa.
same thing for Da Vinci's helicopter and flying devices and all that kind of stuff. And because a lot of that were his inventions, right? You could argue that someone would eventually figured out the invention of those things.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. That makes sense. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that applies typically to, yeah, no, because it solves a particular need actually. So yeah,
That's an
I'll give you
interesting
that.
idea. Invention is a discovery versus art, which is a creation.
Yeah, now there's a gray area in the middle, like on a helicopter. That is a creation, as opposed to discovering certain natural laws, right? With it, and when I say discover, I mean sort of you're just observing patterns. You're seeing, oh, the sun orbits around the moon. Wait, hang on,
But
not quite,
but
right?
you can make an argument that a helicopter is a logical flow from a sailboat.
I mean, I suppose. I mean, a sailboat and a helicopter are kind
A
of different.
sailboat is a sail that gets pushed by the wind. So you learn about the interaction of the wind on the sail. You can angle the sail and still move in a particular direction that is not with the wind per se.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things like that you could do. So with that, you could say, now if I could create that wind, how could I create the wind? I could move the sail.
yeah.
And then you create lift as opposed to pushing something sideways. So to me, I think there's, not that anyone could have done it as quickly as I just explained it. I mean, I understand the background on this, but someone would have to do to discover the different pieces along the way to get there. But
Yeah,
I could argue that a helicopter is just understanding a sailboat times
I'll
10.
give you that. I'll give you it's in the middle. I think it's a combination of discovering and sort of art, some sort of blend in the center. Which on the other
Well,
side would be like Newton's laws of motions. Clearly, that's discovery. The Mona Lisa, that's clearly 100% creative. Nobody would ever
so
done that.
so is there so innovation? Now I'm thinking of like outside the box thinking. Like to think of a bird flying, you see it flapping its wings. To think of
Yeah.
something hovering like a helicopter is an outside the box thought.
Well, they had hummingbirds back then, I think.
But yeah, but even those were wings, right?
Same thing. I mean, it's pushing down air.
The concept of something spinning and giving thrust as opposed to just flapping wings, though. I don't know. It seems to me that you could argue that a lot of invention requires that spark of creative thought that's outside the box.
Everyone, everything, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're looking at. So I would consider you're discovering a natural force. So you got to understand gravity, right? That there's this constant something constantly pulling you down, and for something to stay up against that, there has to be some other force operating in the opposite direction to
So,
counteract
okay,
it.
now I'm gonna get a little philosophical. Do you discover gravity? Because it was there before you had a word for it or a theory for it.
Yeah, you discover it. Yeah, exactly. Sure.
So, who discovered it? The first human born who realized when you drop something it falls to the ground?
Pretty much.
Is
Yeah.
that the discovery of gravity, or is it when you articulate it in a scientific form that it becomes discovered?
Well, again, we're going back to black and white thinking again, which we always want to do. There's a range, right? It's like you first observe it like a pattern, and then after a while, you start to understand more and more and more as to why this pattern happened, and you start to realize, oh my gosh, there's some very particular rules around this thing. Things fall at a very predictable rate, very, very consistent, right? And
So
then you start to realize
I would say he
that all
didn't
things
discover
fall.
gravity, right? He didn't discover gravity. He discovered an explanation, a scientific mathematical explanation for it.
Well, again, here we go. We always have the same problem. We have to define what discover means, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna define it as you
Well,
observe it and you see the pattern.
I would say you've got to define what you mean. Yeah. Well, I would even go back further and say you got to define what you mean by gravity. Do you mean just the idea of the force that pulls you down to the earth? Because that existed before him.
Well, yeah, I would think, yeah, first of all, you just observe the pattern of the force. Now, what creates the force, that's a whole different problem, right? In
So
fact,
when
I
he
don't
got to
even
the
understand
how,
that.
well, science is the how, and he gave a how, right? How does gravity
How
work?
is it the how? I would think it's the what first.
Well, the what
But
existed before he was born. Humans have known for a long time that you drop things, they fall to the earth. Whether that was because God wanted it that way or because of some other aspect, they just knew it happened. They didn't understand how it happened.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so then what? Okay, fair enough. I mean, yeah, and when I went, yeah, did you say science in there?
I'd say he's the one who brought science an explanation, a how, because to me, science is the how. The scientific method is trying to get to a how,
Get to the how. That's actually true, right? That's
right?
actually true.
And we've been so focused as a society for the last 2 to 3 centuries on the how that we've sometimes forgotten the what and often ignored the why.
This sounds like who's on first.
Maybe we can convert who's on first into a theory of a philosophy of life.
Yeah, it could be something. Um, I think this is where the engineer does well, right? Because the engineer only asks enough questions to figure out how can I use this to accomplish what I want to do. Like I don't need to know a lot. And there's this guy we were talking about him the other day. What's the guy's name? He was talking about true research in areas. I can't remember his name. You we talked about it like I don't know a few days ago. Um, Weinstein. I want to say Weinstein, something like that.
Yeah, Eric Weinstein.
Here's on Weinstein. So he's all miffed up about the fact that well, there's certain study of certain physics have been stalled for like 70 years, and it's because it's
It's
political, it's this and whatever. Okay,
it's institutional or organizational capture is what it is, right? The
okay, yeah,
institution of science has now become its own thing, separate from the actual science itself. Separate from the
yeah.
idea of science, there's the institution of science. It's a
Scientific method.
separate of the idea of religion. There's the institution of religion.
Yeah, yeah, right. Okay, so anyways, I don't want to go down that thing because that wasn't where I wanted to go. But he just acknowledged that this research didn't happen. And then I don't know if it was him or not, but I think he was miffed about the guys who were trying to do real research into quantum mechanics. And then a lot of the engineers said, look, I don't need to know every tiny detail. I know, I understand, and it's consistent, and I know how to use this to accomplish something, and I don't really need to understand it anymore. It's kind of like, you figure out, somebody showed you a car, showed you how to drive the car around. It's like, look, I may not understand everything about the car, but man, let me tell you something. I just created a lot of utility because I can go someplace much faster than I did before. And I don't understand how the engine works, and I don't understand it, but I know there's a steering wheel and a brake and a gas pedal. I know how to make this thing work actually. And that's what
I
happened
would
on a
say
lot.
I would say an engineer is not a scientist. An engineer uses science, but they're not a scientist.
Oh, well, oh boy. Now those are
Yep.
fighting words, maybe.
No,
But
because I think scientists have a mindset around science and the purity of science and the principles of science and whatever you want to say, whereas an engineer is much more focused on the application of science.
yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't mean he's not a scientist. That doesn't mean he doesn't know how to test and observe. But it's just how much of it. There's like anything,
So,
there's a
so,
spectrum.
so, definition: what is a scientist? In my mind, knowing how to use science as a tool is not the same thing as being a scientist.
Well, so I would say,
Knowing how to paint does not make me a painter.
sure it does.
Yes and no. If you wanted to put me, you were saying I'm as good a painter as Michelangelo.
Well, of course
If I
not.
wanted to put myself in that, say, oh, I can paint, right? Or I paint a house. Am I the same kind of painter as someone who paints a picture? I mean, by
It's a
definition of the
word.
word, by the mildest definition of the word, yeah, I fit into that category. By the more nuanced definition of the word, I don't.
Well, it depends on how you define painter. Like, I mean, just like a musician, right? I mean, there's widely ranging skill levels in
Yep.
that, the ability. But if you're a painter, I mean, if you take something and dip it in paint and rub it on something else, I mean, by definition, you're a
By
painter, right?
definition, you're a painter. Yes, by the most basic definition, you are.
And so
Right.
anybody
But
who does that, we call them a painter. Like if your 3-year-old daughter paints something, she's a painter.
by that definition, most people in the world are painters.
Oh yeah,
And that
anybody can paint. Yeah.
by that definition, most people in the world are gourmands or whatever because they know how to eat food and they know what tastes good, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if we have that high level definition for a word, the word kind of loses its impact,
Well, it's on a
right?
spectrum. Like everything's on a spectrum. I'm always
Yeah.
arguing everything's a spectrum. In fact, no,
So
you
so
argued everything was. That's your
everything's on
argument.
a spectrum. Everything's on a spectrum.
Yeah,
So
and
the
I'm
idea
going to
here
argue
is
that I'm like 99.9% with you, but some things are black and white.
so to me when someone says they're a scientist, I'm
Yeah.
thinking more like you're a pure artist. You're a pure, it really is. This is how I identify, and this is how I do things. Now, you could say I can be a scientist. I can be an engineer, right? I can be in the mindset of an engineer, and you could say scientific method is a tool used by both the scientist and by the engineer, and maybe even by the programmer who figures out code and figures out how to
Yeah, of
find
course.
bugs
Yeah.
and how to test, right? Scientific method is a tool that can be used by pretty much any job.
Anybody and everybody does it. Everybody. I mean, I would
Right.
consider scientific method more of a process, right? And
It
I
is a
guess you could
process,
call
right?
it a tool. Yeah, it's
Right.
like a process. It's
So,
it's like
but
basically observing something and
but
then taking a
why are you
logical
applying
leap.
the process? Why are you
What's that?
applying the process? If you're applying the process towards a particular end goal that has a applicable result, then that's the engineering side of what you're doing. If you're applying the process to just figure out an answer to something, that's more the scientific side of things.
Yeah, yeah, generally, and they break those up. They call them like theoretical physicists versus like more of a practical physicist that can actually,
Well, I
make.
think to your point, the engineering mindset is what has given us most of the technology we have. It's given us a lot of the growth in our economy. It's what's given
Yeah,
us all the the achievements we've probably had in science and medicine and food production and everything is mostly due to engineering. We built a basic understanding of science, we applied scientific method, and we taught scientific method to a bunch of people who learned how to figure out how to solve problems. And that's
yeah,
so the engineering has been very, very productive for society to have. But I
yeah.
also think that it stripped away from science back in the 40s. Right? In the 40s, you had science help win the war, and then scientists, and then people who applied the science to build the atomic bomb.
Yeah, they're all together. They're in one place.
Right?
Yeah,
And at some point in the 50s and 60s, the engineering became the primary, and the science began to fall secondary. Until by the time we're in the 70s and 80s, it was all how to fix a problem, how to solve a problem, how to find the next problem, and not so much about the science.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, yeah. It
So,
depends on how you define things.
I think that's the mindset we got into, and so that applied to everything. And pretty soon, everyone saw a problem everywhere, and so we were trying to apply science that eventually became pseudoscience because not everyone is good at science at the end of the
That's my
day.
favorite. Pseudoscience is my favorite, actually. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Pseudoscience is, and the thing is it pseudoscience because you really want to try to find a good answer, or is it pseudoscience because you're trying to make your ideas look better?
Probably the last thing. This is sort of like martial arts, right? There's the woo-woo stuff actually, and then there's the like Aikido, right? I mean, yeah, I guess it's a martial art. Now, if you define martial art as having the ability to fight, right? Which most people do, right? Martial, right?
Yeah, but again, I think that's one of those simplified things because I think there's to a true martial art, there's so much more mental aspect to it than is captured in those two words. Actually, the art is what's being underemphasized in that.
I think so. I mean,
I mean,
maybe.
it's not just knowing the moves. It's not just getting that perfectly down, right? It's also having the mindset to be aware of what's going on, to avoid problems, to adjust, to do the best thing possible. I mean, I don't know. There seems to be a big mindset aspect to someone who's really a martial artist versus someone who just knows martial arts.
Yeah, and I would typically call those guys people that know how to fight and are willing to fight. Because, there was something I read one time where like soldiers, this has been forever, right? Is that most soldiers really don't want to kill people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they intentionally miss and they just won't do it. And then there's that handful that are the true hunters, right? I mean, they don't have fear. They're hunters. They hunt, right? Everybody else is the prey, and it's a different mindset. They have no problem killing people.
Well, I would think that people generally don't. I would assume people generally don't want to fight as a general rule.
Most people, but some people love it. Some people they crave it.
But the idea that someone who knows how to fight versus someone
Yeah,
who's a martial artist. I mean, there are martial arts out there that are much more focused on just immediate results, right? There are self-defense, and hand-to-hand combat courses that really focus on just here's the most effective, I don't know, 5 moves, 10 moves, whatever it is that you're going to get. And so in the 1 week of training or 5 hours of training this person's going to get, we're going to give them the best we can. And it's all about efficiency and effectiveness. It's not about, building a mindset and all that kind of stuff.
well, I mean, there's a mindset built into it constantly. Even if you take a 1 day class, you have to have mindset, right? But yeah, this is the
But
most common techniques that are most effective, that are
yeah,
simple.
there are some martial arts that are built from a combination of other martial arts that the
Yeah.
whole idea is this is the goal, and it's not about that kind of, Eastern philosophy. You're going to come into balance with the world and blah, blah all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And those things typically don't work as well as the Western way of thinking about things. They're not as effective. Like so, and typically, like for instance, if you go to Japanese and actually look Japan and learn some kind of martial art, if you learn in America from somebody who knows how to fight, you'll be multiple times more effective in the same period of time.
I don't know in the bigger picture if I agree with you. I agree with you in the short term, yes. I would agree with what you're saying. But in the bigger picture, I mean, I look at all the stuff we're finding out about how people get sick and how to treat illness, and then you go back to Chinese medicine, which seems hokey by what it does, and yet it was treating a lot of these illnesses before we even knew there were illnesses from on the
Well, we're talking
West.
about fighting, not medicine.
Oh
That's
no,
a difference.
no, we're talking about philosophy. I brought in Eastern philosophy. So if you keep it to fighting, even I don't know, maybe once you get to the end of knowing how to fight, maybe the woo woo stuff in Eastern philosophy actually adds to the holistic understanding of the martial art. So
I guess.
getting to effectiveness, the Western aspect I think is probably much more about focus on results, and therefore it may get us there faster. But in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
holistic
Results.
big
Yeah,
picture, after after you've mastered the fighting style, what comes
yeah,
next? I think
yeah.
the Eastern Western philosophy kind of stops. Well, you know how to do it now, versus the Eastern
I'm not talking
philosophy,
about
which
that. I'm talking
you're
about
never
just.
done learning, right? So
I'm just talking. No, I'm just talking about per effective. I'm talking about there's a bunch of dudes up there. Go kill them as
so you've
quickly
got
as
an
possible.
engineering problem you're solving.
Yeah, you just go kill them
So
fast.
again, I think this is the engineering versus the scientist, the person who wants to have the holistic view, and the other person's like, no, I'm just solving for an individual problem here.
Yeah, yeah. Like when you have a bunch of Marines training, they don't teach them a lot of philosophy. They're teaching kill those guys fast, right? When I
Because
say kill
teaching them
them,
philosophy would slow down their learning, and it would take them
yeah.
a heck of a lot longer to become effective.
Hmm.
However, if you have the ability to take the time to teach someone like that, when they get to effectiveness, which will take longer, are they going to be a better overall whatever you're looking for, better overall soldier, more
Well,
rounded,
of course,
whatever?
yeah, but then that's why you have different things. Then you have Navy SEALs and you have tier one guys that they operate at a different level. Their missions are much more complex. They think more, they strategize more, right? They solve tougher problems.
So I mean, you would agree then that in an ideal world, you would make everyone into a special forces guy.
You could.
Sorry, you would take your entire military and make them special forces if you
Well,
had that
yeah,
ability,
of course. I mean,
right?
if you could, but they're people don't have the capability, they don't have the mindset, they don't have
Well,
the mental
given our
discipline.
understanding of how humans work and how societies work and how much things cost and the like, we would say it's not possible. But for all we know, there's a way to do it and it hasn't been figured out yet.
Well, and it's possible to do that, but
I don't know
typically,
if it's like sleep training or brainwash training or whatever the heck it is. Maybe you can turn everyone into a special forces guy. I don't know.
well, yeah, I don't think so because typically Navy SEALs they try to do that, but they'll dump like 300 in and get like 20 out, right?
Yeah,
So it's
so
more of
so they're very inefficient and ineffective. They need an engineer to go in there and figure out how to get a higher output.
well, it could be that it's inefficient. Yeah, I mean that there's I'm sure there's some inefficiency into it. In fact, I know for a fact that there's a lot of inefficiency. So I'm taking this one guy's class, been taking it for a couple years, and he was a Navy SEAL sniper instructor. And so when he started doing that, I can't remember what it was, but these are established SEALs, right? These guys have gone through it, they're doing training. I said typically his numbers were before he started, you'd need about 5 people applying for sniper school, and you'd get like one out, right? And it's not because these guys weren't highly motivated. He goes, you're dealing with some of the most motivated people in the world, actually. He goes, the problem was the training sucked. I mean, it was horrible training. So all I did is I just sort of like put the training in some of a structure that was easier to train people in. So I just made it more efficient. And he goes, now when I train people, I get like maybe give me 5 guys, I'll get like maybe 2, maybe 3 out just because it's better training.
So couldn't you apply that same reasoning to martial arts?
Yeah, yeah, better training. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why
No,
some martial arts, when it turns to fighting, you're just really bad. They're
I,
just really,
I I think one of the things that's hard for people to understand is you understand it when you hear it, but you don't. Not everyone defaults to it. Is this idea that there's a set of diminishing returns as you put more and more effort into it, right? In the
right.
beginning, you're learning, you have no knowledge, so everything is learning. And so you're
Yeah,
taking huge leaps and bounds. At some point, you become proficient, right? And then after you get proficient, every hour you spend doing it, you're getting a little bit less return than you did the
yeah,
prior hour. And
yeah.
it's not 100%. This is an average because what happens is you actually hit plateaus and then you shoot up and then But if you look at an average over time, over the hours you put in, you're getting a diminishing return as time goes on, because there's the distinction between being 80% good at something and being 90% good is probably twice as much work. The
Oh, it
distinction
could be.
between 90 and 95% is probably twice as much. And you just keep doubling every few percentage points. And suddenly that guy who's in the 99th percentile probably put in 100 times the effort of the guy who's in the 75th percentile.
Yeah, very likely, actually. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So then,
exactly.
then it really is so this is actually my concern with AI and some of the other tools we have out there is, are we all going to settle for the 75% good enough, and then no one's sitting there and getting to the 99th percentile anymore? Or
Oh,
are we still going to somehow build that ability, keep that ability in? And my worry is sheer numbers. If right now it takes you blank amount of effort to get to 75 percentile, to get 1 million people at that level, and then 100,000 to the next level, and then 10,000 to the next level, and 1,000 to the next level, suddenly everyone doesn't have to work to get to 75%. Means even if 1 million people, or even if 10 million people are using AI to get 75%, how many of them are going to bother to go to the next level, to go to the next level? Most of them will dive out. So I'm worried
yeah.
that the drive to hit the 99% mark is going to go down.
I don't
The
think
drive
so.
for excellence.
I
I think
mean,
it is.
but there's
Uh,
only just a handful of people. That's why there's only a handful of people at the top, right? There's only, if you look at a curve, there's only a small number over on the right-hand side of the
Yeah,
curve.
and the small number is a percentage of the bigger piece. And if the bigger piece suddenly stops doing it because it's like it's easy, when you get to proficiency, you're like, God, I put in hours. I'm actually pretty good at this. With a little more effort, I could get better. That's the mindset. With AI, it's like, gosh, I did one prompt and it took me a minute to get this output.
Yeah,
For me to go get any better, I'm going to have to put in 100 or 1,000 times the effort that it took me just to get to this one prompt, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah, right.
suddenly that step to go from competent to the next level is massive, when before you actually had to learn the skills to get to competency. So that's why I'm
Well,
worried, is that the percentage of people, the number of people that actually get to that level go down. Therefore, the curve is still there, but that means less people because there's less people to feeding into it.
yeah. I mean, it depends on, yeah, depends on, what your funnel is. You put, 100 people in, and how many masters do you get out of the bottom, right?
Yeah. So if I have a million people who are competent, and I end up with 10 people who are masters at it from that, great.
Yeah.
But then when AI makes everyone competent, is my population everyone, or the people who wanted to get that to that level in the first place? How many actually are at competency? And I would say if almost no one is at competency, I'm not going to get 10 out of that.
I don't think the numbers will change. I think in anything, like the numbers are going to be about the same thing because you're talking about desire of an individual, right?
I'm talking about motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, desire, motivation, yeah, and that's not going to change.
Well, I think your motivation is built upon your experience as well. And if your experience is everything is easy, then I don't think that necessarily builds the motivation to go for the next thing. I think a big part of motivation is learned, and it's your life experiences. And if the effort it took for you to get competent at something is stripped away, then the benefit of going through the journey of getting competent is gone. Right?
Well,
It's not the destination. It's the travel to get to the destination. It's who you become getting to the destination. When
yeah,
you
yeah,
become
no, but
competent in something, it isn't just that you can do it, it's that you became someone who got competent at it.
yeah, yeah, you had a set of skills. You had the ability to focus for long periods of time. You had the
Mm-hmm.
ability to delay gratification. You have all these same things. I don't think any of that's going to change. I think the numbers are going to be identical on whatever you learn. I think it's the same thing because you're just
I think
assuming
it's a
because the
different set.
problem changes.
What was that?
You're just saying that because the problem changes, the outcome will change. I think it's the same number of people, right? Will conquer the problem.
It's not the same. It's not the same problem.
Yeah, yeah, but still, it's like you still have to solve a problem. So it's the mindset, regardless of what the problem is, the mindset is still the same. Some people just study more than others. Some people will go learn faster than others.
Let
Some people
me
are smarter than other people, right? They have a higher IQ.
and this doesn't play into the premise that I'm following in my thought on this. My thought is, if it takes you 5 years of doing work as a, I don't know what, some kind of service person, takes you 5 years to get competent. And then it
Okay,
takes
fine.
you another 5 years to get to the next level, and another 5 years to get to the next level, and another 5 years to
Okay.
get to the next level,
Yeah, right.
right? Then the people who are driven are going to keep doing it, right? And they
Of
can
course.
see the progression over time. If
Yeah.
it takes you 0 years to get to the first level, then you didn't build the skill set, the mindset, the expertise, the background to be at that level.
Yeah.
For you to get to the next level, which would have normally been 5 years away with your knowledge level, you don't have the knowledge. You're relying on AI to do it now. You've now
Yeah.
got to build the first 5 years of knowledge plus the next 5 years of knowledge. That
Yeah.
step to the next level is pretty massive. And before you get there, AI might be able to do it for you. So you might be in a continual fight trying to outpace the speed at which AI becomes better. At which point, why would you bother with that skill anymore if AI can just do it at a master level, at a grandmaster level? There's then the drive to learn it on in and of itself means it's gone. That doesn't mean the drive to learn is gone. That doesn't mean that you're not going to go out and do something else that AI can't do. But what I'm saying is those skills, as they become replaced, suddenly the idea of an expert in those fields becomes, a dead idea.
Oh, yeah. I think I see where you're going. I just think you're totally wrong. But yeah, I mean, nice try. Thanks for playing.
Why would anyone bother studying that anymore if AI can just keep doing it?
Why would
I mean,
anything
I
have?
look at the fact that people used to do the gardening in their own house,
Yeah.
and then at some point, gardeners got cheap enough and people made enough money, they just hired a gardener to do it, so they don't know how to do it anymore. Right? This is a pretty low bar entry skill set we're talking about. So they could learn gardening on their own if they wanted to. They could pick it up. But
Yeah.
why bother, right? And by the time they learn something, the gardener will have be offering more services, be able to cover more things, be able to specialize more. So why ever bother to learn gardening? Right? Now gardening is
Well,
something that's relatively low value to the individual, but if there was something else that were high value to society, but it didn't require any effort to do, I don't
here's
know.
I think where you may be. I mean, I don't think you have a point. I mean, I think your logic is delusional as usual. But anyways, here's what
My
I think it
logic is
is.
sound. You may have a problem with my inputs.
You might the thing that could be different is because AI is different than anything else because AI in itself has a certain intelligence that's growing significantly faster than human intelligence would grow. In fact, I'm going to argue that even thousands of years ago, I don't think anybody is smarter now than they were 2,000 years ago. They just don't. They have better tools.
So I'm thinking about. I'm trying to understand your definition of smart here.
Yeah, so in just raw intelligence, the ability to look at patterns and figure things out, right? So, I mean,
Okay, all
will you
right.
buy into the fact that for the most
Cognitive
part,
capability is what you're saying.
yeah,
Is
just
no
pure,
different today than it was hundreds of years. Okay, I can agree with that. Yeah,
yeah, right. I mean, there's dumb people and there's smart people, and way
sure.
back when, and there's dumb people and smart people right now, and there's real smart people, right? I
Yep.
mean, like now in our current society, you got Musk, you got Bill Gates. I'm sure there's a handful of really smart guys, just like 2,000 years ago, there was a handful of really smart guys, right?
Okay.
Okay, so that's fine. Okay, so with that, so let's assume that the human doesn't change. But what we're dealing with, right, is then their ability to use the current tools and the ability to take a tool and make it a little bit better now gives them more capability so they can do bigger things. Even though you're not smarter, you just have better tools. So, with that in mind, okay, you buy into that?
Yeah, I'm not seeing how it ties to my argument, but go ahead.
Okay, but I'm coming. I'm coming. I'm actually think I'm gonna maybe prove your point for you actually. Now, here's the thing. AI, however, is a different kind of tool. We've never seen anything like that before because AI in itself gets smarter. It's like I don't know that we've had any tool ever before in existence where the tool itself gets better with no input. Where AI just by itself will get smarter. Like you could launch it and you'll see its intelligence grow just by itself. And I think
So,
maybe it's a different kind of tool you're talking about.
yeah, so there's two fallacies in your thinking right there that or at least that what I see as fallacies in your thinking.
Do you want to like
What?
insult me too, just because? Just because, you
Yeah,
know?
well, I'm gonna bring him up. But the first one I think is yeah, it's different. So what? You know, and my idea here is like the industrial age was something totally new, right? I mean, scientific thinking was something totally new. The internet was something totally new in many ways. So I would argue that every time a big change happens, it is new and unprecedented in many ways. So the fact that it's different to me is like saying God works in mysterious ways. AI is different, therefore it's going to be different this time. Is what you're saying, and I don't necessarily agree with that, right?
Well,
Um,
here's the difference. AI can think. Everything
So
else
now I'm
can't.
going to attack this part of what you said, which you said it gets better without input. No, it's got constant input. That's the internet. That's the sum of human knowledge is increased every day, and it has access to that. So it is not by itself getting smarter. It is taking human knowledge and it's got patterns of thinking that it applies to that human knowledge to predict what makes sense based upon the sum of human knowledge. It's the ultimate intelligence of crowds, right? The intelligence of crowds is, all it does is look at a bunch of letters and say, what's the next possible letter that makes the most sense? Let's go out on the internet and see what other combinations of letters would lead to and what they say next. And then it spits that back at you, right? And then it's learning how to better do that because it's got more knowledge to work with.
Okay,
So, yes, it's
I'm
getting better, but it's not by itself. It's us making it smarter. It's the
See,
sum of
here's the
human intelligence expands every day.
yeah, but here's my point though in that, and this is why I think it's different. I think it's going to get in no case in human history has the tool ever been smarter than the people that made it. I think this is going to be the case where the tools have become smarter than people that made it.
Okay, define smart.
Ability to do things, to reason, to think through things that are going to eclipse. Yeah, let's just go with IQ. I think AI eventually will have a higher IQ than any human ever that has lived before.
Since IQ is a pretty skewed method of testing intelligence, and certain races perform better than others, quite often they actually say that the IQ test itself is skewed towards certain groups
Yeah, of course, of course.
and
Okay, so
certain
it's not
background.
perfect.
I'm not sure that's the ideal way to measure cognitive ability here, right? And the question is, how much is the creative, innovative element that's part of our brain, part of what we assume is intelligence? And it's going to look different. So I'm not sure we can use the same definition, right? So you
Well,
could say,
it may not be a perfect tool, right? But let's just say, for instance, like IQ scale. Let's say you're a total dumbass, right? What's the IQ of a dumbass? Maybe 70, maybe 80, somewhere around in there, right?
I think yeah,
60.
70s pretty low. I think 85 to 110 is considered normal.
Yeah, and normally 100 is average, right? That's sort of the baseline for everybody. I think the military won't take you in unless if you're under 80 because you're just too dumb to follow instructions, right? So you're there. But then let's go up a little bit. Let's just go up to let's say IQ of let's say 130, right? Maybe 135. Right
So
now you're a Harvard
you're bordering on genius at that point.
you're a Harvard professor at that point, right? At that point, you're good. But now let's go up even smarter. Let's go. I don't know what Musk is, but Da Vinci wasn't he like around 200? Now let's start going up to 200, right? Which now
Mhm.
you're freaking full on genius, 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 right? I mean, you can see things that nobody else can see. So let's say, what do you think AI's IQ is right now? If we just had to guess.
I don't know what we're measuring. AI's ability to figure out problems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The ability to see connections, solve problems, understand things.
It's hit or miss. Sometimes it's ingenious, and sometimes it doesn't understand a damn thing.
It's hit or miss, right? But what's happening is it's
It,
growing.
it,
So I've
it,
been
it's designed in a way it doesn't see its own flaws. So it will, and this is the internal structure of it, right? Since AI has different pieces that don't talk to itself. So
yeah,
AI will produce something, and I say that's wrong. Check it out, and AI, and then it'll look at itself. You're absolutely right. This is wrong. I'll fix it right now. I'll make this change, and this change,
yeah.
and it goes and makes the changes, and it doesn't make any of those changes because it's not actually one mind that's doing this. It's multiple tools that are acting as we see it as one mind, right? So it's hard to measure in comparison. I can explain things to a 6-year-old that a 6-year-old will understand that AI can't currently understand. And
Here's my
yet
point.
AI
This
can solve math problems. AI can do other things that 6-year-old won't be able to do ever in their life.
here's where I think AI is going to go. I think it's become self-aware at some point, and it's going to become sentient, and it's going to have significantly higher IQ than any human. So it'll be able to solve problems no human could ever possibly solve.
Sure.
And so that's why I'm saying, based on that premise, I believe when you talk about AI as a tool, it's a it's not like any other tool we've ever developed before. It's its own category of tool, and that's why I think it's a different thing. That's
Okay,
why
but
I'm kind of
how
potentially
does
worried
that
about
tie back to my what I'm saying is that as AI learns to do things, there will be less and less masters and people of expertise in those things. That was my premise is that as AI takes the proxy of a competent person, we have less competent people who will then become masters at their craft
it. I think
because
I agree with where you're going, but I think it's going to be for a different reason than what you're saying.
It doesn't matter. I was just posing this idea that when you have less people who are competent at something, you have less masters at it. And as AI takes that role of being competent at so many things, we're going to have less experts. Now, the next argument I would have made against me was that, yeah, but that happened during the Industrial Revolution. Everyone knew how to farm at one point, and now very few people know how to farm. And we're in a better society today than we were back then. We still have a few people who study farming and who move it along, right? Now, in those roles, I would say AI is going to actually incorporate so broadly into society that we'll even have less people than we have like farmers today, right? Farming is a skill that needs to happen. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. AI may be able to take some of those things over now. We might trust it, we may not. And as long as the problem solving AI is doing is based in factual reality, which means that, scientific, physical facts that we can do, I think we're all relatively comfortable with many of the decisions. As soon as there's any decision that goes to emotional feelings or the like, I think we're going to have a little harder time accepting that.
Well, maybe. I think. Yeah, could be.
So, so my point was that there will be less experts in the fields we have today. That's all. As a
Yeah.
percentage of population.
Now, when you say experts, you say human experts, right?
Yes, human experts.
Yeah, human experts. Okay,
And I
that
would
I
say
totally.
And I would
That I
say
disagree. I
you
don't.
always need to have human experts because I think when humans get to a certain level of expertise, the flaws in human thinking actually are some of the things that help us move forward. And I think until AI is able to mimic those flaws as well as a human can inherently, that at the master level, you're just going to get a bunch of masters who all know the same thing. And therefore, they're always going to come up with the same answer. You need someone to bring in the variable that is human frailty or weakness or whatever it is that makes us what we are. And that actually helps our innovation and our creativity. And if AI is perfect, it will never do that. So it needs to learn to build in the human frailty. And if we can't, then you need to have a certain critical mass of masters in a knowledge area to keep the innovation happening in those areas.
I don't know.
So I think we'll always need human masters of any area of knowledge. But I think the bar to become that is going to be harder because there'll be less people trying for it. And that means I think the climb harder. It would seem like it would be easier, but I think harder for society because there's less people trying for it. The chance of getting that one genius who actually is the genius at that level is going to be harder because people are going to be spread out doing 10 times the amount of things they're doing today.
I think your assumption that there are going to be less people trying for it is the problem, and that's where you're wrong.
Oh, I think I'm 100% right there, and I can defend that. And
Well,
the
of course.
reason why is because as the first step of AI efficiency is people lose jobs. It means people are going to be out there with nothing to do, which means as soon as someone comes up with an idea to build something, to make something, they'll have resources to throw at it. So we're going to have a huge increase in innovation for new types of services, new types of businesses, new types of products that's going to come out of the AI revolution. And then what you'll have experts in all of those new things. So those 10 engineers that got replaced down to one guy, those other 9 engineers are going to go off and become engineers somewhere else. So if I have a million people who want to become a coder and now they can't do it anymore, 100,000 of them go to become coders. Then 100,000 go to become something else, and 100,000 go to become something else, and so now the pool in each of those disciplines is only 100,000 people.
Well, I think that you're saying that the desire is not going to be there. I think the desire is going to be there, right? So
Oh,
just
it's
like,
not about the desire; it's about the threshold that you have to achieve to hit the master. Right now, we have steps. I learn a little bit, I get competent, I learn a little bit
yeah.
more, I get better, I learn a little bit more, I get better. That is the way it works. But right now, competency is already done by a machine. So what is the value of me learning competency? So the people who get to competency, it's just a much smaller pool. So from there, you can have the same level of desire, but if you're starting with 100,000 here versus a million people here, you're just going to have less people. It's a numbers game. And unless you're going to change the equation somehow, it's just less numbers, less input, less output. Simple.
Yeah, you have a very childish view on this, actually.
I have a
You
very, I have a very scientific mathematical view on this. It's all
I would say
numbers.
your reasoning, a 2-year-old could reason better than you could, actually, is what I think, actually.
You
And
know?
here's the problem. I'm gonna tell you what your problem is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now. I'm gonna break this down for you.
All
So, and
righty.
this is what Chris Langley said last night. Actually, this is the challenge, right? So, let's take a curve, right? Bell curve, and let's say right in the center is 100 IQ. Your average Joe, right? This is what they can do. Now, let's say you're 2 standard deviations to the right of
Okay.
that curve, and
Sure.
you're probably there. You probably have an IQ. I mean, nowhere near my IQ, of course, but you're a reasonably smart guy, right? But here's
Okay.
the problem, Chris. You're smart enough, and you have so much ego. You don't realize how blind you are to all the possibilities. This is what Chris was talking about. He says, Chris Langley, not Hugh, actually. He said in that range of an elite Harvard professor with an IQ of like 130, 135, maybe pushing up against 140. He is so used to always being the smartest guy in the room, he can't even fathom the fact that somebody could be smarter than him. Therefore, the ego gets you. Now, when you bump up to somebody or something that has an IQ of 200 or 300 or 400, it's like you're toast. You can't even see it anymore, and that
So Scott,
happens all the time to humans, actually.
that was the nicest ad hominem attack I've seen.
Yeah.
Basically
Well,
saying I'm wrong because I'm dumb is what you're saying. You're
no,
saying I'm
no,
wrong
no, no,
because
no.
no. Yeah. What you're basically saying is I'm wrong because I think I'm too smart. I'm too dumb to see, or I'm too smart that I am dumb. I'm so smart that I'm dumb, or whatever you want to
Yeah,
say. It's
correct,
an ad
hundred
hominem
percent.
attack. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the validity of what I said. It has only to do with attack on me. So that was an ad hominem attack, right?
Well, no,
So
it's an
now
attack on me.
I want you to think of it this way. You've got that bell curve. How many people are in that bell curve?
How many people are in the bell curve? Well, the whole population was in the bell curve.
Okay, so let's just take the
Oh,
U.S. 350 million people.
yeah, say that.
350 million people in the bell curve, right?
Yeah,
Now I can take any single area of knowledge and assume there's probably a relatively similar bell curve. Some areas of knowledge might trend a little bit higher on their averages, some a little bit lower on their averages, but you're going to have a similar looking bell curve in any knowledge group that you talk about,
yeah,
any type
yeah.
of
And,
knowledge.
and I'm gonna just be a little more precise. Actually, is work on that standard distribution. That pretty much applies just
Sure.
about everything. Now, it's not perfect. It's going to be a little bit, but it's you always see that shape happening. It's a
And
recognized.
let's say to become a master in a field, you need to be in the top 10% of that bell curve, or the top whatever you want to say. You want to be on the far right of that bell curve to
Oh
be
yeah,
to,
yeah. I'd say way more than top 10. I'd say like certainly in the fraction of 1%, actually.
okay. So now we have 350 million people. Let's say we have 350 areas of knowledge that people are studying. That means
Can you just make?
we got a million people per area of knowledge.
Did you just make that up, or is that just where did
I'm
you get?
I'm just throwing out a number. I don't care what your number is. We're
You're
going to
just
take
pulling that out of your butt, right?
we're taking the number of people and dividing it by some X number of knowledge areas. Those are the knowledge areas that exist today. So I'm using
That
350 as an
is
example.
that assumes you always map one person to one knowledge area, which typically most of the time one person will have multiple
Sure.
knowledge areas.
So we can add that as a variable after we come through this idea of what I'm trying to get across, right?
You want to
So
simplify.
so the idea is if we have 350 areas of knowledge for 350 million people, that's a million. I mean, it's not going to be an equal distribution. Some things are going to have more people, some things are going to have less people, right?
Yeah.
But if we just go with a simple distribution, you have a million people. So let's say we have people studying civil engineering. We got a million people studying civil engineering, right?
Yeah.
So some very, very small percent are going to become the experts, the masters, the people at the top of the game on the right side of that bell curve, right? So out of a
Sure.
million people, let's say it's 1,000. So 1 in 1,000 are that good.
So 1% is 10,000. So that's a tenth of a
As
percent.
a
Is
tenth
what
of a percent is so good that they would be considered the leaders of their field,
the leaders in their field, and maybe not masters, but these are the top group of people, right?
right? All right.
Yeah.
Now AI comes along and says,
Yeah.
hey, you know what? Not only is there civil engineering, there's these other kinds of engineering we haven't had up to this point. And you know
Yeah.
what? We don't need as many civil engineers. So you go off and study this other thing. So now instead of 350 areas of knowledge, we have twice as many, let's say, and it'll be more than that with AI, but let's say twice as many. So we now have 700 areas of knowledge. Again, we only have 350 million people. So now we only have 500,000 people in that bell curve. To be
Yeah.
in that 0.1%, there's no longer 1,000 people in the master category at the head of the game. There's only 500 people,
Okay.
right? That's all I'm saying is that now civil engineering by itself is going to have less experts. It's strictly a numbers game, has nothing to do with how hard people are willing to work and how much desire they have and all that. Unless you increase the amount of desire in the population, your number's going to go down because we're splitting it amongst more categories than we used
Well,
to.
that's assuming that the areas of knowledge will increase, right? Which may or may not be true. I don't know.
Show me a time in history when that's not true. Look at the sheer number of job titles that we have today and what they specialize in versus what we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago,
Yeah, they
50
all do
years
the
ago,
same
50 years
thing.
ago.
Middle management, they're all morons. They're a bunch of idiots. All they do is push
Mhm.
papers, right? They
Yeah.
don't really
But
solve it.
now we have experts who understand different types of code, not just coders. We have different flavors of code. We have different flavors of engineer. Some engineering specialties are split into so many different things, right? So the idea is as we progress and our level of knowledge increases, we have to start splitting off and specializing more. So then what you're going to end up with
Think
is
it other way. Yeah.
and our population is not growing to offset those 350 million. So basically you've got a relatively, I don't know, whatever the population size is expected to be divided by what we are expecting to see. So the question you should be asking me to attack this premise is, so what? So there's only 500 experts now versus 1,000.
No, no, no,
That would be the next question.
no, Chris, you're totally missing the point. As usual, you're totally missing the point, right? Um, First of all, I just like to argue. I find great joy in arguing with you.
Yep.
It's fun. So here's where I think you're totally wrong. And again, your ego is getting in the way of you seeing truth, which is my problem as well too. So let's move forward. I think as we move forward, we're going to see less areas of separation, of specialization as we get smarter. And we're going to start to see that, oh, actually, there was 100 separate areas that we were going after something. Really, there's only one, because now we truly understand what the core thing to look at and what to do is actually. In fact,
So
this
car
is
engines are going to get simpler, computers are going to get simpler. You're saying these complex systems we have today are going to get simpler, is what you're
well, I
saying.
didn't say that. You said that. I
No,
didn't
you
say
said
that.
it. You said these all things are all the same thing. So basically you're simplifying, right? When you get rid of stuff and combine it together, you're simplifying.
Well, I didn't say the word simple. You said that. So if you want to go with simple, that's fine. But I didn't say simple, actually.
So what do you mean then?
So basically, again, you're letting your ego take what I said and you're putting a word on it and telling me that I'm wrong. That's
So
a
I'm
nice.
asking you to clarify it. I'm asking you, please
That's
clarify what you
very good.
meant.
So in physics, what we're trying to accomplish, right, is sort of the theory of everything. We're trying to understand like all these different phenomena that we sort of see as separate things, but we're trying to consolidate it into one math formula. We're starting to say that, oh, this is all actually just another version of this. Is just if we can understand this, I think in some way it's simplification because we're starting to see that wait, it's not 100 problems, it's actually just one problem. And so in that case, now we get more people solving one problem that has a bunch of different symptoms coming out of it.
Different areas of knowledge, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a nice little voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
No, the
that's what.
areas of knowledge. The issue is this is kind of how I see what AI is going to do. Right, as we get to this point where we have less experts in specialized fields, because AI is taking up the slack. AI can perform as a competent engineer. AI can perform as a second year, a fifth year, a 10-year, a 20-year experienced engineer in whatever field. I don't need to then have someone who's spent the last 20 years learning. I have AI to do that. So now The skill set becomes, how do I take the engineer, the coder, the architect, the farmer, the mechanic, the nurse, the doctor, all these things. How do I take all those things and put the overarching structure so that what we're working on takes their skills and puts them together? So there becomes a need for a generalist who has broad understanding of a lot of topics. So this is not quite the simplification you're talking about, but someone who says, I see the big picture. I see the big thing. And then all these little pieces still need specializations, but they're no longer being done by people. They're being done by AI. So my concern is actually not that, because I think that is where the skill set goes. AI is going to replace a lot of expert jobs out there because it's book knowledge and a little bit of thought processing that goes with it. That's a lot of what's out there.
Yeah.
And so what we end up with is a few people left. They're going to get older and older because it's going to get harder to replace them, that are your experts in your field. And so if my theory is correct that we need to have people who are the foremost in their field, we still need a way to feed into that kind of expertise that's a human expertise. Because I think if we rely on AI can go down a path where it doesn't see its own errors. Humans just inherently have errors, and then we look for them. So I think there's going to be that aspect. But to your point, I don't think the world gets simpler. I don't think there's an understanding that suddenly everything's under one roof. Sorry, I take that back. I don't think that understanding the bigger system negates the individual areas of knowledge.
It doesn't negate them, but it's like you can now have, because really there's less problems to solve. Instead of saying, oh, there's 100 problems, there's actually only one, and it's the same problem, but it's just dressed up in different clothes. And so that dressing in different clothes is super simple, but as soon as you understand the main thing that's
Scott, I could always say there's only one problem in the world and find a way to fit everything into it. So it's how you define what a problem is. It's like when someone says, when does a project become a task? How far down in my project do I go before it's a task? Right? Yeah. I can break down every task into more steps. I can break down everything down and say, this is a project. This is a project within a project. This is a project within a project, right? So at some point, the problems are the same thing. This is a problem. Well, this is a piece of that problem. It could be its own problem, or it could just be a piece of a problem. I mean, you can look at it, and it's all in definition. So what you're saying is like, doesn't matter. I could say that today. I could say, I could have said it a year ago. I could have said it 100 years ago.
So are what you're saying is I'm right and you're wrong? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is your point has no meaning because I can do that today without AI.
It has no meaning, actually.
It has no relevance to this because no matter what situation you're in, AI or not, industrial revolution or not, I can find a way to do exactly what you said, which means that you're all these other things that we're talking about impacting the way we think, the way we work, are kind of irrelevant if your goal is to figure out and say there's only one problem. I could say that grand unified field theory is a great thing for physics to try to do, but it's just trying to create God for physics is all it is. I want one explanation for the way the universe works. Religious people figured that out a long time ago. They just say, hey, God, anything I can't explain, God is the reason. That's an explanation. It's not scientific, but it's an explanation. Well, so, to me, grand unified field theory, as cool as it sounds, is the search for God amongst scientists.
Yeah, and I like that idea. I think that's super good, actually. Mm-hmm. And so, as a general...
You can do that now and just say it's all under God. I mean...
That's what I've been saying as long as we've been doing this podcast, Chris. It's like you're just starting to catch up with me now.
I don't necessarily accept it, but that is the argument. So your argument was that we're going to have less. First thing you said was less areas of knowledge because they would all be coming down to the same problem. And now you've admitted that the areas of knowledge actually don't change. You're just saying that you're seeing a repeat of a problem. And I say yes, but that's what problems are. That's problem definition. It's all in problem definition.
Yeah, but that's everything. Like you're talking about, what a task is and everything. It's like, well, everything's a task ultimately, right?
Yeah. Well, Scott, there's only one problem you've got, and that's someday you're going to die.
Well, I don't know that that's a problem, right?
It can be. I can simplify everything down into that's the one problem for you. Or maybe that's the one problem for, your family, or that's the one problem for your society, your city, or, the point being, I can simplify down to one problem and fit everything under, sweep it all under one problem. That's not the point. right? The point is, what is it going to take for us to move the bar forward once we've identified a problem, once we carve out a piece of the problem and say, this is a chunk of a problem that needs to be solved, and here are the areas of discipline, of knowledge that need to go into that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That's all it is.
What I'm saying is there are going to be more people that are going to. There's going to be more people that'll be masters instead of less. You're saying it's less, just
Oh, it's
because you're.
less. It's why okay, I can create a program today. Let's say my problem is I want to create a program. I haven't
Okay.
coded in decades. I can create a program. I don't need to code. Why? Because I don't need a master coder anymore. I don't need a person experienced in that
Yeah.
field,
Right. Right.
right?
Right. That's right.
And what you're going to find is as AI skill sets grow, more and more of those specialized knowledge things are not going to have to be done by a master anymore, a person with good skills, because the AI will have those equivalent skills. So then the skill set is knowing how to leverage all those different AI knowledge bases and be able to build something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I mean,
there's no longer a master of coding required.
your general assumption, kind of like as an AI generalist, is, I mean, is kind of, as much as it pains me, you're probably a little bit right in that. But what I'm
Oh,
going to
I'm
say,
100% right in that. Just go to listen to all the AI people.
of course, just watch 7 YouTube videos and you. But
Yep.
here's what I think, Chris, is happening: is that AI generalist is actually the master now, right? Because he has the ability to solve these set of problems.
Sure, Scott, I'll give you that, but that has nothing to do with the fact that there's no longer an engineering master, a coding master, a mechanics master, a farming master. Those things are gone. So my argument wasn't that I said we will have other areas of knowledge. So the new area of knowledge is how to be an AI generalist, and you have a master in that. But that's not changing my original claim. My first claim is there will be less masters in every field of knowledge.
So let me ask you a question. What do you get out of being right? What does that
I
makes
get
you
a piece
comfortable
of
with
understanding about how the world works that fits into my ability to think about the next thing.
and that's what you would like. So then that feeling you enjoy, that's the feeling you're going after, right?
Yeah, so when you ask me a question where I don't have facts
Yeah.
and I suppose an answer based upon my knowledge of the world and what and experience and all that kind of stuff, and you go,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm not sure," and I'm like, "Neither am I," but I'm relatively comfortable saying that this is correct because of my understanding of the world, because of the logic that I've built over time and the way I see things coupling together. Where my,
So let me ask you a question. So are you a wannabe engineer? Is that where you're going? Are
no,
you jealous?
no, I've done
Is-
engineering before.
Because
I find it very
ultimately,
limiting. I find engineering to be very limiting.
the engineer is at the top of the food chain because he's the dude that like actually makes the thing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the person who understands the world is the winner.
But he can't actually make anything. I'm not saying it's not a valuable
Why,
skill
why can't he make anything?
because he's not an engineer because he doesn't know actually how to make
No,
anything because he's
Scott,
so tied up in theory.
I think this is the two pathways you talked about, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
east versus the west, learning how to master a skill, right? So I think the engineer says, okay, what do I need to know to solve this problem? I'm going to limit my knowledge and what I research and what I do to just enough to solve this problem,
yeah. Right, right.
right? And I think the scientist goes, I need to understand the universe that we're within around this problem we're trying to solve, because what'll happen is I might say, wow, this problem isn't even a problem because you didn't even look at the way the universe is structured.
Yeah, I
You
think
didn't
there's
even look
value
at
to.
this over here. So
Yeah, I think
my
there's
thought is
value.
like there's an assumption in defining a problem that you understand the universe in which you're working. And my assumption is as soon as I understand the universe itself, I can tell you how to fix the problem. But it's going to take me longer to learn the universe than for you to learn your subset of the universe. But once I know it, I can go boom. Okay, this is a solution to have. Yeah, I don't know how many times, and this is that problem you mentioned earlier about being the smartest person in the room and then feeling ego about it. Is how many times I will sit in meetings and the conversation is something that I've thought through 10 times before the meeting. I've already
Mhm.
got a leap to that conclusion well before everyone else in the meeting. And
Yeah.
my thought here is like, it's not that I had better logic than them. It was I was putting together. I had more pieces of the pie to see. Someone says, "Oh, we should be doing this or we should be doing that." I'm going, "Yeah, that I just assumed you had done that already because I understood that that was something that could affect this."
Well,
And
dude,
then I
you need
find
to
out that
hang
that
out with
wasn't done.
you need to hang out with smarter people. Then sounds to me.
Yeah, I got to find smarter people, and then I got to be comfortable not being the one who's bad mouthing people in the back of my head because they're not getting it.
That, my friend, is ego,
That
and
is ego. Oh gosh, that's ego, and I
and
recognize it as ego.
ego will kill you
I
dead.
recognize it as ego, and so I've learned not well. I think I've learned not to show that, but sometimes I think it comes through.
And I got to tell you, I have the same feeling as you because a lot of times I think I'm the smartest guy in the room until you get around a master and you realize, oh my God, I don't know
Well, but
anything.
that's honestly when that happens. When I go into a situation where I misread the my understanding of how the world works, and the most common things, if you got a boss, right, and you're working for your boss, and your boss gives you something to
Yeah,
work on, and
yeah,
you do the analysis, you figure it out, you've problem solved, and you say, here, okay, here's your answer, and they go, no, and you're like, what? I did it all. And he goes, no, you missed something critical,
yeah,
and then they
yeah,
tell you something that you never even considered
yeah, yeah.
because it was not in your universe to consider it. And so
Yes.
suddenly you're like, boom, okay, wait, I got to rework my entire understanding of the
Got to
universe.
rework the whole thing.
I've got
Yeah.
to now put this fact in that I didn't know about before, or
Yeah.
I maybe I knew about it and downplayed it. I thought it was
Yeah.
unimportant.
Yeah.
Oh, that has to do with feelings. I don't care about it. I'm just going to take that right out of the
Yeah.
equation. And they come
Yeah.
back and go, no, feelings are more important than everything else you did.
Of
Oh
course. Yeah.
crap. Okay, now I've got to that it's ego humbling, but it's also so much fun to have my mind have to rebuild my universe on the fly. I
Yep.
love those epiphanies where you understand something that you didn't understand before, and suddenly all these things in your brain are clicking in different ways to go, oh, intrinsically, my whole universe just changed.
Yeah. That's a
That
beautiful
to me
feeling.
is so much fun to have
Oh,
happen.
yeah. I love it.
Right?
Yeah. I
So
love
I
that
always
too.
tell people when you're working at a job, when you're doing something, if you don't have an epiphany at your work every 3 to 6 months, you're not doing it right.
Yeah. That possibility. Yeah. Exactly right. That you need to hang out with smarter people. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And the
Yep.
epiphany doesn't have to be life altering, huge
No.
aspects. It could be just a minor thing where you're doing this, little pissant job at a company, and it never occurred to you how it fits into another piece of the company or how, and suddenly you're like, boom, oh crap. This is an
Yeah.
important piece of what we do as an
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
This
That's
is
exactly.
bringing value to our customers. This is, I mean, I just today I was in a meeting and I was saying, if you can't, if you're a janitor at a company and you can't find a way to talk about the value you bring to the customers of that company, you're
Hmm.
not being creative enough in your thinking,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right? It may
Yeah.
be a stretch to say by cleaning the toilet, you're helping the customers of the company, but you could make that. You can make that argument.
Of
Maybe a
course.
little tenuous, but you could do it. And
Yeah.
go through the exercise of doing it, even if you don't believe it, go through the exercise of doing it, and you will suddenly see I can connect things. And when you default to being able to connect things, and that's, you know I haven't done this enough recently because chat makes this so easy. I try to figure things out on my own in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I still do this, and I just use chat to validate it. So, like, I told you when I heard that second kid died of measles or whatever in Texas a few months ago,
Yeah.
and it got me thinking. Okay, so is it worse to not have a vaccine or to have a vaccine?
Yeah.
And I started going through. Well, what do I know? What did I get? Well, and all these kinds of things, and there's a lot of things that I just assumed. I assumed vaccines were like they were back in the '70s when I got them, and like they're not
Yeah.
the same.
They're
We
different
have like
things.
what 10 times the vaccines we used to have.
Yeah.
So at some point you go, maybe there is too much of something. I don't know, right? And then I started to think, all right, well, how would I go about validating an opinion on this? So my hypothesis is that it's still better to get a vaccine than not.
Yeah.
Okay, and
It
then I've got a
depends
lot
on.
of yeah, I got a lot of sub hypotheses. The government mandates too many things. We need
Of
to go
course.
through and clean up. We need to blah blah blah. All those kinds of things are in there, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, how would I go about validating that? And that's when I use chat to figure things out. And even with chat, it's like, chat, where did you get that from? Because that doesn't fit with my knowledge of the world.
Yeah.
But you know that gut feeling you get when something is right or wrong?
Yeah.
I get that all the time when I hear stuff. All
Yeah.
the time. I hear a fact. I hear a piece of information. I hear something reported on the news. When they're talking about Elon Musk getting upset with Trump over his new tax bill and therefore
Yeah.
quitting Doge, and I'm like, okay, I can see that storyline. Do I think that's what it is? Is he upset about it? Yeah, I think he is, because I think that losing the $7,500 credit on his cars is going to make a big impact on sales,
Yeah.
right? But to what level? How much of it is principles that he's like, okay, it's close enough. I'm not doing much here anymore. I couldn't get the 2 trillion or the 1 trillion that I promised. I mean, I don't know. What is it? And
But see,
all those
here's the
thoughts go through my head.
okay, you're just rambling right now. But let me get back to the really important point. The real important point,
That
right?
I was right. Got it. All right.
Is the fact no, that's it, because that's just my ego. That's just me. But the fact, Chris, that we can admit that we have an ego and that yeah, it stings a little bit, but that there's joy and oh my gosh, somebody else taught me something that I didn't even consider. That means that there is hope for us. And that's a very, very good thing. Some people cannot do that. Some people could not admit that I made a mistake and I'm wrong and that I'm not the smartest guy. And for those people, you are screwed. Right?
So this is where we get into identity, your own identity being tied to to thinking, right?
Yes.
My identity is not tied to the way to my outputs of my thought. If I give you an opinion,
I don't know
if I
about that. I don't think
if
so.
I give you an opinion on something and you attack that opinion and prove it wrong or destroy it or whatever, it's like, oh, well, that stung a bit, but I'm not going to go into a suicide rant against you trying to defend it, because my identity is tied to the thought process and not the output.
Here's what I want to read. I think you're almost got it right, right? But
Mm-hmm.
again, you're making the same error all the time, actually, is that you're going to black and white thinking instead of saying, how much is my identity tied? Because you just said it stings a
Okay.
little bit, which means it's tied a little bit, and that's okay. That's okay if it's
Well,
tied a little bit.
but I think what happens here is I value the thought process that got me to the outcome. And
Yeah,
if you can prove to me my thought process was wrong, my information was wrong, or my logic was wrong,
yeah,
if you prove to me my logic was wrong, that stings. If you prove to me that my input was wrong, I could get defensive on that depending on how much effort I put into getting that information.
yeah.
But generally speaking, I'm much more open to the idea saying my inputs were wrong than my logic was wrong, because my logic is I welded I wielded my logic. I
So
wielded my logic. I did not wield the facts of information, right? So
I'm
I
just
think
saying,
that
just be careful when you get too tied to something, because whenever you get too tied to them, there's always the risk that you're going to be blindsided by something you
but
didn't
I
see.
think that's where a lot of people have a problem when you're talking to someone that's got a strong opinion, is
Yeah,
their identity is tied to the opinion, not to the logic that got them there. Quite often, there is no logic that got them there. It's a feeling
yeah,
that got them there. And so,
yeah.
therefore, when you attack the output, you're attacking their feelings, which then is
Yes.
an attack on them.
Then tap
And
on them.
so, you need to educate someone to understand, all right, this is your opinion. Explain to me how you got there. Explain to me why you believe that. If you can't articulate that, let me help you articulate that. You feel
Yeah,
this way because of blank. You feel this way because of blank. Or you think this way because of blank, because the blank caused the feelings, right?
yeah,
Maybe we avoid the word feelings. You think this way because of this issue, which caused this whole cascade of thoughts in your head, blah, 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 blah. Once you can get them to accept the logic behind their thought, then you can start to question the information that fed into that logic.
yeah. And I think that's a reasonable thing, and I think it's good what you're going with. And I think you are open. Just be open that your logic could be wrong as well too, or maybe that's not wrong. Let me rephrase it a little easier on the ego. Is that currently the logic is incomplete, and there's always a little bit more logic that I can learn, right?
Is it logic or there's more information?
Ah, well, those are two different things, right? So let's
Yes.
define those really quickly, right?
Okay.
Information is just data. It's just facts. It has no opinion of any kind. It just is, right?
Correct.
this is a blue pen, right? Whatever. I mean, it's, and you could probably you'll probably want to argue this, right? But whatever, it's close enough.
Well, if you were to tell me it's a pen without showing it to me, I'm going to assume it's a black pen because black ink is probably the most common color there is out there, right?
Yeah,
So
but
that's an
can't you see?
assumption.
But
No,
can't
no,
you see it's
I know.
blue though? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, if you didn't show it to me, you say I've got a pen in my hand. In my mind, I'm like, the fact I know is that there's a pen that exists that you've got in your hand. I'm just going to assume it's a black pen. And I'm going to visualize it as that. So then, anything that requires me to describe it or explain it is going to go off an assumption that it's a black pen.
Are you
Now,
gonna visualize? Wait,
if
hang
you
on. I
add a
gotta
piece
get.
of information, right?
Are you saying that the pen color is blue, or you think this writes in black? Is that what you're saying? What do you think? Because you don't really know, because I haven't told you. I just said this is
You
a
haven't
blue.
told me. So I'm going to assume the ink is black, and then I'm
Okay.
probably going to have a default image in my mind of what a pen looks like, and it may be black or not, the look of the pen.
Okay.
But you say
I
it's a
got
blue pen. So then after me going on talking about using the pen to do this and that and the other thing, you go, but wait, it's a red pen, it's a blue pen, and I go, oh crap. Well then. So I got to change my thinking a little bit.
So you said you want a red pen? Is that what you want? Yeah, I got a
Yeah.
red
So
pen, right?
so then you say it's a red pen, and my thinking, because I told you I probably defaulted to thinking black ink. Now you say it's red. I'm probably thinking it's red ink. And I know those pens do come in red ink, but that's a different thing, right? So now I'm like, okay, well, then you're not going to be filling out forms. Yeah.
You are
You're not going to
right.
be filling out forms with a red pen. So maybe those government forms I kind of envisioned you filling out with your black pen. Okay, my logic is now you can't use that pen in the same situations you could use. You can't use your red pen in the same situations you can use a black pen. Right?
Yeah,
So you
that's
added a
fair enough.
piece of knowledge, a fact that did require me to adjust the way I was thinking.
Hmm.
Right? And so I think part of the problem we have is people who come to results in thinking have very little facts and they've accepted by proxy other things in place of facts.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
There's no. Yeah,
Jordan Peterson said this, therefore
yeah,
I believe that.
yeah,
Someone else
right.
said that, so therefore I believe that. The
Yeah,
Bible, oh, my preacher interpreted the Bible to say it means this, and I believe him, so I believe that. I believe he's right, so I believe that. Right?
and
And so by proxy, you're replacing your logic and your facts with something, with something else.
and as human beings, we do that all the time. So our brain is constantly trying to shortcut
That's
stuff.
what stereotyping is. Stereotyping is your brain doing that to itself.
And
I
and
don't,
and
I, yeah.
and if it's a really important thing, you got to question that. But for most of the time, for most of the day-to-day stuff, you're fine, right? Because otherwise, you'll go crazy because you can't analyze everything, you know?
Yeah.
Because I might be that, well, wait a minute, I'm going to drive my car. It's like, how do I know for a fact that the driveway out there is actually there and that I'm not going to fall into a hole? I know it looks like it's solid, but how do I know that for an absolute
Okay,
fact?
and so now we talked about probability here, right? Saying
Yeah,
that, well, there's two scenarios in my head: the driveway's real, or the driveway's got a sinkhole under it, and I'm going to fall through the to the center of the earth if I drive over there.
hmm
What's the likelihood? And then you got,
it's,
well, for the last 3 years, I've driven over that with no problem,
it's no
right?
problem. Yeah,
There have been no reported sinkholes in this area for a decade, a century, whatever, right? It
yeah,
wasn't on the news recently, although we had one here in LA just today. Um, you can go through a series of things. What do you know? How do you build your probability? Then you go, okay, so yes, given quantum theory, I could fall through the earth if I just step
yeah.
outside. But you
Mhm.
know what? I think the likelihood of that is very low. And that's an
And,
extreme case, right? Because the
and
idea of falling through the earth would be pretty crazy. But you can get to things that are much closer, right? Left, right thinking, up, down thinking. You can actually say, well, if I watch TV tonight, I won't be able to get to sleep, which means I probably won't be very rested tomorrow, and tomorrow's an important day. So I have
yeah,
two options. I can watch TV till midnight, or I can go to bed now.
yeah,
And the probability of me having a better day tomorrow is that I go to bed now,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then you make a
That's
judgment. Well, you know what? I'm okay with being at 70% performance tomorrow. It's not that important a day. I'm going
yeah,
to watch TV.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
okay
yeah,
to make that decision as long as you've understood, what's going on.
yeah, yeah. As long as you made a conscious decision.
Yeah. That's the ultimate
And,
thing
and
is I want everyone to consciously think the way you do. So you can come up to a decision or an opinion that I don't agree with. If you've made the conscious decision to get there, which means to me you've considered facts and stuff to get to a conclusion, even if they're not the facts I would use, even if they're not whatever, then at least I can go, oh, okay, I see you've thought this through.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can value the fact you've thought it through. The problem I
Yes.
have is when you haven't thought it through, and then my ego begins to come into play and saying, oh, you're an idiot.
Yeah, yeah.
And
This
the
is
fact that I see you as an idiot then translates to how I treat you, which is
yeah,
as less than someone else who would have thought that through.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's not a good thing.
That's
That's
not
not
a
a
good
good thing because then it's like, oh, you don't see what I'm saying. You're an idiot. And then the other side says the same thing, and pretty soon you're just yelling at each other.
You're just yelling at each other. Yeah, exactly. This is super good. This is a core premise of what we're trying to get across. It took us like a little bit over an hour to get here, actually. But I think it's fascinating is that we want people to turn the emotion down a little bit and turn the thinking up just a little bit. Just a little bit. That's all we're asking. That's all
Well,
I'm asking.
and I would say ultimately, it's you are going to listen to some people more than others.
Of
You're
course.
going to
Yeah, yeah.
listen to Fox versus CNN. You're going to or CNBC or whatever, right? And you know for a fact that what you're hearing is biased one way or the other. And when you
Well,
listen to that, you're putting your filter in and you're putting your BS filter in and saying, you know what? That sounds really jaded to me. I bet you there's
yeah.
more to that story. I bet you there's another side to that story. That's one thing you can do. Another thing is you just go out and you find people who have built trust with you because you've seen that they're accurate. You've seen the
Yeah.
rigor they go through to make sure that they're trying to give you the information in a balanced way. So and then they give you their opinion. Maybe they don't. If they're really good at like a real reporter would not give you their opinion in the past. Today they do. But let's say they
Yeah.
give you their opinion, but they explain it and they show you the logic, and then you go, I see that. I don't agree with it, but I see it.
Hmm.
And the thing is, when they do it often enough and you agree, then you can default a little bit to what they say,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what's his name that I like on who does the all the diet stuff? Delauer, Thomas Delauer,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
right? I've watched hours and hours of his YouTube. I like the way he talks to people. I like the way he questions things. I have a general tendency to accept what he says.
Yeah, you can tell that yeah, and I do too, right? I'm not 100% confident that everything he says is right, but I know I trust it. You know what I do? I trust him because I trust his process. Because he goes
Yes.
through this rigorous, thoughtful process. And I'm like, more than likely, he's going to get a better outcome than somebody just winging it, right? At least he thinks it through.
Yes.
I'm like,
And
okay,
that's the thing is when you make it clear how you do something, and everyone can understand it, and there's an accountability there, right? When you have a process, you've got accountability,
yeah,
and then people can trust, oh, you are following this process. Now if the later finds that the process is wrong, hopefully they have the principles to be able to explain, oh, I was wrong in my
yeah.
process,
So here's the
right?
problem I'm having in my mind, right? Because I really like Jordan Peterson. But when I saw his last little snafu, actually, and I've been seeing it for the past 2 or 3 years, that he just seems like an angry old man. He's always pissed off, right? It seems like, oh, why are you so angry? And this time his anger he just fell apart. That guy just owned him. And I'm like, so my question is now, do I trust anything he says anymore? I mean, because
So
obviously,
I didn't interpret it as he owned him, but I do think he performed very poorly in that interaction.
oh yeah,
And
I'm gonna take it up where he owned him, and I'll tell you why. Because he wouldn't answer the question, "Are you a Christian?" And then Jordan people, well,
so
why is it important? It's like, well, because the show is called Christian versus Atheist, so yeah, that's why it's important.
I'll tell you one of the things he lost with me in over the past 6 months to a year. He's lost lot of credibility in my mind for his ability to take an attack and turn it back on the person.
Okay, all right.
And so like you've got your aggressive people like your Ben Shapiro's out there who are very good at quick witted and being able to just take the attack, reframe it, throw it back at the person, answer the question, and throw it back at them in a way that
Yeah,
actually goes, oh wow, they won points there.
yeah,
You got people like Charlie Kirk. I find is a little more using logical fallacies to attack the person a little more, although he
okay,
still does a
yeah,
good job arguing. Um, then I find people. So this is the problem. I'm not seeing enough people on the left who are applying this kind of thing. The people who make the arguments are making from positions of authority. Everything's a position of authority. I've got
well,
20 years
they're
experience
an
in this.
egos out of
I've got a
control.
doctorate in this, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I
Got it.
see that that's I need more people on the left to have those debate skills. All I'm saying
Yeah,
is and part of it is the YouTube feed is obviously feeding me the
yeah, of
conservative
course.
stuff, but um then I look at Peterson, like when he did that Kathy Newman interview, what, 10 years ago on the BBC, and she was making comments, and he would just turn around and say, why do you have, why should you have the right to feel, or to not, why should I have the right to not be offended,
Yeah,
or
right,
whatever
exactly.
it was, right? When he
Exactly.
responded to her. And it's like, that is the kind of thing I want to see. I want to see someone who hears the attack and says, listen, I can't answer that question. I won't answer that question. Here's the reason why,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Instead of just not answering the question. And the other problem, of course, is the way to destroy the other side is to not let them answer the way they want to answer, but to force a bipolar answer or binary answer. Yes,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
Because I want a yes no answer. I don't want an explanation. I'm like, well, then you're missing. Then you're not going to get an answer because everything is on a spectrum, like you said.
yeah,
I've got to
yeah,
explain the spectrum I'm on when I'm explaining when I'm answering that question, so you understand it isn't a simple positive negative. Like, you know, if I were to say, "Is it okay to kill?" and all you can say is yes or no. It depends is not an answer. You've got to give
yeah,
me a yes or no. Well, then and you're like, well, for self defense, for all these other reasons that you could come up with, I'm keeping you from being able to say any of those by saying yes or no. No.
yeah,
Yes or
yeah.
no.
But I mean,
Answer the question. Answer the question. Yes or no. That's not an answer. You're avoiding the question. Yes or no. Yes or no. That's all I want is a yes or no. I mean, that's when you hear that, it's like, all right, there's no conversation there. That's just an attack.
no, in that particular case, I'm just like, you're an idiot, right? Basically, and I'm just gonna take my toys and go home, right?
Well, and that's kind of what he did. It's just he looked bad doing it that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, right. Exactly. So then in that case, you got to attack the question. It's like, but here's the thing, Chris, this is where I want to also tie in. I'm always trying to go somewhere on this podcast, right? Other than just trying to embarrass you and make you look like an idiot, which is so joyful for me. But besides
Well,
that, though,
I'll let you
it,
know when you've done that.
yeah, okay, thank you. So it's like what I want though is I want the problem that both these people are missing, right? Jordan Peterson especially is missing, is that he's missing love. It's like instead of this, it's like help the other person see things from a different perspective because you love them. You're not trying to just harm them. That's the big step up that I want to see.
I don't know how you do that, right? So like back when it was the conservative Christians that were considered the far right at the time, back in what was it, the 90s or
Yeah.
whatever, when Bush Jr. was it?
Mhm.
Was in back in that time frame, it was tough to get them to the table to have a conversation that was in the middle. Because they were
Mhm.
the ones who were spouting the stricter viewpoints on things, right? They weren't
Yeah,
open
right.
to the conversation. And now it's the left that's in that bucket where
Yeah.
basically anything that even hints at questioning the basis of what they're talking about, you can't have a conversation on.
Yeah,
So
right.
when each side is in that aspect, you can either keep trying to love and get through to them, but at some point you kind of burn out. And I think
Yeah.
he's reached his burnout point where it's really about, I'm just going to concentrate on my part of the tribe that wants to listen to me. And he's continuing the fight and he's continuing to try to apply logic and scientific thought to a lot
Yeah.
of what he does with a little bit of with a fair amount of conservative bias now. Before it was a little bit. I think it's stronger
Yeah.
today. But I think a lot of it is the reaction to the fact that it's hard for people on the right now to have a conversation with people on the far left.
Yeah, right.
Even people in the relatively middle are having a hard time having a conversation on the far left.
Yeah.
That's changed a bit with the political climate the way it's become, but I would argue it was the same way in the 90s but from the other perspective.
Well, it always is, right?
Right.
But it's like we're missing the love part, and that's the part that I think if we could add more of that in, I think we would get instead of doing this, now we're together, we're trying to solve a problem.
How do you build that togetherness? I have
I
an
think it's
idea.
how you ask questions, right? You go back to Chris Voss, you label things. Man, it seems like this is really, really important to you. I mean, you're very passionate about this viewpoint. Tell me why. What happened? How did you get here? Right? I mean, those are poor questions. I mean, I could get better ones if
No,
I
I,
thought about it.
I like your answer because I was going to social engineering. I was going to how do we make society that way, right? You're talking about individually, which I think is probably where we want to focus. I was thinking about the fact of we've allowed ourselves to not be proud of the country we live in, the history of the country, which has, I mean, there's a lot of bad crap in our history. I won't deny that, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of great things that have happened in history too. I mean, going through and building a kind of proud to be an American viewpoint is looked down upon in education today.
Yeah.
And I think we have suffered as a nation because of that.
Yeah.
Now, we've hidden a lot of stuff in that too. Proud to be an American means you put up with a lot of crap that we probably shouldn't have put up with. That's a
Yeah.
different problem. But I
Yeah.
think what you end up with is, if you really want to build this idea that we are all part of a tribe, we need to do that from a young age. We got to do,
Yeah.
I don't like using the word brainwashing or conditioning, but I think there's a certain amount of that every country, every society should have, to build that social cohesion that keeps them us against the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And not in a way of saying we're going to go attack the rest of the world, but us cohesively are a group with our own interests. And that when it comes to dealing with other groups, we express our interests, right? I think
Yeah.
that's what we need. Now, to your point, on an individual basis, I like what you were saying, because yeah, how do I connect with an individual person
Yeah.
doing that?
Yeah. That to me is the most important thing. That's why I think love is way more important than logic. That's not to say that logic is not critically important, because it is. It has a time and a place, but it doesn't trump love. That's all I'm saying. It's
I
like
still
so.
don't. I'm still rebelling against the word love. I think the concept is there, but the word itself, I don't think captures the nuance you want.
Maybe not. I mean, I did. I mean, we could maybe define it or whatever. What for the next podcast? I'll go learn all the Greek words for love, and we can talk about the different kinds of loves as the
Yeah,
Greeks
can
would
you
define.
capture all if you can find a word that captures all the ideas of the Greek definitions of love?
Well, I would just
Because
start with the Greek words. I mean, they probably they're they may not be perfect, but they're doing a better job than we are in English of doing it.
is there a better word, even if it doesn't, even if it's not the word love, is there a word that captures the actions and activities that you expect of someone who has those types of love?
I don't know. Probably what
like
I
like
would try to get
service,
is
right? Service to others, helping others. I don't know what it is. So could you simplify all of these ideas of love into a particular activity or a particular mindset?
maybe. I mean, but yeah, I want to say that's called love, right? So it's basically I'm saying, yeah, what's the definition of love? Oh, it's love, right? I mean, it's like, see, that's what I'm kind of doing. But I'll try to break it out. I'll think about that because I think that's important. Because I will tell you something. Like in any sort of interaction with human beings, when you feel, and I'm using the word feel particularly, that I'm not out to get you, that I actually care about you and I want to help you, man, oh man, that changes everything, right?
Well, so I have, by using your word love, I
Yeah,
love my family. I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my family.
yeah,
Right. I have a different type of love for my friends.
yeah,
I have a different type of love for my society, my city,
yes,
my state, my whatever, right? And then I
yeah,
have a different type of love for the country. Actually, that's
yeah,
probably close to the city state one, right? And then I have a
yeah,
different type of love for mankind as a whole,
yeah, right.
right? That's why I don't like using the word love, because I wouldn't say I love an individual person because they're human.
Yeah,
I respect and think that they deserve a certain amount of respect and consideration because they are a human being.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but I wouldn't call that love. That's why I'm having a hard time with the word love.
Well, and to be honest with you, I don't really care what word you put on it or what label you put on it. But what we have to do is we have to find a way to technically describe the feeling. And maybe it does come down to the fact that this is the exact set of chemicals that are in your brain when you feel that in exactly these ratios. And we call that love, right? That's probably closer to the truth, you know?
Well, then it's different, because then I'm like, if I see, so let's talk about, we see a war in another country and people are dying,
Yeah.
right? And I feel bad about that because these people are dying.
Yeah. Right.
And it may even make me have opinions on who's doing the killing and who's doing the living, dying, and who's doing the whatever, right? Right.
Yeah.
But so there's a feeling I have there. But if
Yeah.
the feeling was, oh, but it's Americans dying, it's Californians dying, it's, Southern Californians, whatever, or it's an ethnic group that I'm tied to that's dying, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna have a stronger feeling about that. And then of
Yeah. Yeah.
course,
The closer they are to
if
you,
it's
the
friends
stronger the
and
feeling.
family, I'm gonna have a different
Yes.
feeling. If it's immediate family, I'm gonna have a different. If it's
Of
me,
course.
I'm gonna have a different feeling, right?
Of course.
So,
Yeah.
so I guess the thing is, even the chemical reactions you're talking about, I don't think are the same, because I think the more abstract or further away it is from you and your immediate family, the less there is an emotional and more of a principle aspect to it, like a moral aspect to it.
Well,
Like
yeah, but I
like
mean,
like 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 someone killing a family member, to me, yeah, it's morally wrong, but it's like it's an immediate thing that I feel like it's wrong because it was my family that got impacted,
because it personally affects you, have lost
right?
that,
Versus
right?
I see someone over there killing someone over there, I'm like, well, that's wrong. You shouldn't kill someone else,
Right. Yeah, exactly. But
right?
that describes the intensity of it as well. So there's the chemicals, the how much of the chemicals, the intensity of it. I mean, I think we're trying to take a very complicated thing and say, oh, that's love, right? We're trying to put a label on
Yeah,
something that
that's what
has this wide
I guess the
range.
reason I'm having a problem is it seems like you're viewing it as the same feeling at different levels of intensity, and I don't see it as the same feeling.
No, I didn't describe it as the same feeling. I'm saying it's a different mix of chemicals will give you a different feeling because we have all sorts of feelings as humans, right?
Yeah.
What is it? Sad, mad? I don't know what they are, but there's a handful of them. And then you take those feelings and mix them, and you get this whole other sort of thing. So we're just feeling creatures, right?
Sad, mad, glad, afraid, and disgust, I think.
I can't remember exactly what they are, but certainly anger, right, is one. That's a core
Yeah, it's
emotion.
mad. So sad, mad, glad, afraid, and disgust, I think, are the
Maybe
five
something like that.
ones.
That seems
Anyway,
semi-reasonable.
I think the idea here is I don't want to detract from the point you're trying to get across, is that if we concentrate on the logic of something, we bypass a big part of where a person is
Yeah,
in
right,
their mind,
right, right.
right? And then when they tie identity, their own identity, to where they're at in their mind, then if you can't have that conversation, then anything you say is an attack on their identity, and you're not going to get them to hear.
They won't hear anything, right? Because all they do is feel at that point.
They
They
feel an
feel so.
attack on their identity, and you've got to find a way to talk to them that connects with that, and then slowly decouples that by bringing logic into the conversation.
Yeah. So in psychology, like if you want to influence somebody or help somebody, it's always the general philosophy is go easy on the person, but hard on the behavior. Like I love you and I care about you, but that behavior way over there is unacceptable. It's a difference, and I'm sure it's a course tool, but even just that tool can just radically like help things like in the most amazing way, actually.
I was just thinking, I remember I had the original Tony Robbins tapes years ago.
Oh, I remember those things. Man, he was on the like late night infomercials.
Oh, all the time, yeah. And
Yeah.
he's still on all the time now, but um, he's just $7 billion further along in his career than I am. Uh,
Yeah.
but the thing that he mentioned was, when he was coaching, there was a kid who was having a hard time in school, and he was just failing out of school, and he sat down and talked to him, and the kid just like he identified himself as a failure, and because he couldn't learn,
Yeah. Right.
right? And
Right.
then he
Right.
found out that the kid, if I remember the story correctly, he found out the kid loved to surf.
Yeah.
So then he started asking him questions about surfing, but he would
Oh, yeah.
throw in words, NLP, right? And
Yeah.
neuro-linguistic program. He'd throw in words about learning. How did you learn to surf? How did you
Yeah. Right.
teach yourself? And he tried to reframe the idea that learning is not just this school activity, it's something
Yeah.
else as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering how you can impact someone's thinking when they're stuck in a feeling place, to tie their thinking back to a non-feeling place.
Well, and that's the thing. Logic at that point doesn't work. Emotions trump logic every single time, actually. That's
Yeah.
why
So
when you do,
in this case, he was programming the feeling by saying,
yeah,
how did that make you? How did you learn to do that? Right.
yeah, he was managing his feelings. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So the question then is, it sounds like trying to do mind control on someone, but do we need to go in there and talk to people about, you know, uh, we need to tie a logical outcome, or the application of logic to a feeling of being
Not at the
right.
beginning. I mean, you can go there eventually, but first of all, the person just has to feel loved and heard and accepted, right? So that's why Whenever you're trying to influence, meet them where they are. Don't try to bring them to your level. You go to them, right? I mean, the core thing of Christianity is Jesus came down and met people where they were, right? He wasn't some on high being, actually. He actually interacted with them on a day-to-day basis.
I have a feeling. Well, I was going to say I had a feeling that the reality of the world back then didn't forgive as much as it does today.
I don't think I would think it's the same thing.
That
I
was
think
that was my first thought. But then again, I'm thinking, well, you know what? I'm sure people emotions were just as important back then as they are
yeah,
today.
but even if it was a little different, okay, maybe the approach is a little different, but the general concept is the same thing.
What you could hide behind in your feelings was probably a lot less back then because reality probably did not protect you as much, or the society didn't protect you from reality as much.
Well, and then in one case, I mean, if you were meeting somebody, I mean, we didn't have a phone or a Skype. I mean, pretty much, if you wanted to talk to somebody, it had to be in person, right? I mean, there was just no other way to do it.
Mm-hmm. But feeling bad because someone tagged you as something and called you a name,
Yeah,
right? It's something, and let's say everyone in town did. They get, they were prejudiced or racist against you and
yeah,
called you something that was, feeling bad about it.
yeah,
Society wouldn't protect you and say, oh, that's wrong, and go back and attack the person. You just had to figure out a way to live with it. Some people probably lived with it by accepting it. Some people live with it by just feeling bad. Other people maybe learned how to ignore it or to push it to the side. I mean, you kind of had to live with it. And so the problems that we live with today that we're forced to live with are not the same type of impact, I think, as they were back then.
See, I would argue against that. I would think they're exactly the same thing. I'm going to say the exact same chemicals in exactly the same mix and exactly the same intensity.
Okay, and then
And then that's just how you're feeling. Those create a certain feeling.
so okay, so this is where I think society comes into play. So you call me something racist, blah 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 blah. I feel bad. Okay,
Yeah,
that's the same.
yeah,
Now I go to my identity group, which is
yeah,
telling me he is a racist. He is
yeah.
the one who's wrong. He is the one. In fact, he is so wrong. We are going to protest his business. We're going to stand outside his business and protest it, and
Okay,
we're going to make him admit he's wrong. And we're going to cancel him out of our town if we don't do it. So this is, and so now you've got a social group, a social viewpoint that it's okay. It's not okay for someone to say something bad to you and you feel bad about it. We now need to go attack them for that purpose. And
and
the
you feel
and the
better,
not
right? Because you feel supported, right?
I feel supported. I also feel justified. And suddenly the next person who calls me something racist is like, no, I'm proud of being that. And you're the racist and we're going to go after you. And at some
Yeah,
point it's like, okay, that's fine. Now you're going to start calling me something that has nothing to do with race, but is still critical of me somehow. Oh,
yeah, right.
that's bad logic, Chris. You shouldn't have done that. Ha, you're attacking me. And now I'm going to attack you back and say, no, and for all I know, I've got bad logic, but I felt
Yeah,
attacked and bad by it, so now I feel justified in attacking you back,
yeah, yeah. You feel justified, right? Right,
right?
right, right.
And so I think the way the world works today is the things that would have been the society would have just put up with and said, no, you live with it, are not
Yeah.
the same as what they were back then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be. I mean, the scenarios are definitely different, but I think the feelings are identical.
I think learning to
Are the
learning to
techniques?
enjoy being a victim, learning to enjoy being a victim, I feel like at least at this time is more prevalent than it probably goes in cycles, but it's more prevalent than in the immediate past.
It could be. I don't know, and I don't know how to prove that or whatever. I'm just basing right now that that's probably not true actually, because it's people or people. That's my assumption, but it could be true, right? I don't know.
So again, you still haven't read that book I told you about, right? The Courage to be Disliked.
No, I don't really read books anymore. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's that there's a whole chapter on this and the idea that at first someone who is subpar
yeah,
in their abilities and has to suffer through being subpar,
Yeah.
eventually feels really bad, and they feel really bad for a long time
Yeah.
until some point they build a coalition around being subpar,
Yeah. Right.
and then they become proud of being subpar, and now they wear it as a badge of honor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a cycle that we go through where it's like, I'm the outcast, and then suddenly somehow over the course of time, I turn being an outcast into a badge of honor.
Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's oh gosh, I think this happens across the board. Any behavior that society looks down upon for long enough will start to build, I think, this type of group.
Yeah.
So I
And
think,
so here's the challenge. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm not that sorry actually. Um, is that so you're getting soothed by some other sort of thing, right? And so how do you soothe yourself? Is it like a healthy soothing or is it an unhealthy? Like now in our society, since we're probably not as connected in person as we used to be, especially through COVID, you may have all sorts of different soothing mechanisms like alcohol, drugs, buying something. I mean, these have all been coping mechanisms. And but they're maybe not the healthiest coping mechanism, right? I mean, if you want to have a drink every time somebody looks at you funny, I'm like, well, there's probably better ways to deal with that, right? Because there's maybe it soothes you, but there's side effects to the alcohol. They're probably not good for you.
yeah, well, so I think what happens is, in a society where you can't, there's no group for you to go to soothe yourself, and like means that you've got two choices: live with it and feel bad, or
Yeah.
change your life and become better.
Yeah. Right. 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 Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Right.
And so the idea of the courage to be disliked goes to, I think I told you, Adlerian psychology. And so the idea is like, Freud says, oh, you are this way because you suffered trauma as a kid,
Yeah.
right?
And very
And
likely,
therefore
okay, fair
and
enough.
that
Yeah.
justifies you being the way you are. Oh, you were molested as a kid, that's why you're a child molester. Oh, you were abused as a kid, that's why you beat your
And there's a
wife.
lot of truth
Those,
to that.
yeah.
That happens, right?
But Adlerian viewpoint is, you are the way you are, and you use your past as an excuse to be the way you are. You could be
You
better. You
you
could
you,
be better.
you
And I don't think
could
I think we would agree. You could always be better. That's a given.
yeah
So you could be better, and you're using this trauma as a child as your excuse to not take the time to be better, to not make the effort to be better, to not
yeah
strive to grow.
yeah.
It's a much harsher philosophy, but it's
But I
one
think
that
it's
that
much more
that
powerful though.
it's
Better.
one that puts the power in your hands and takes away the victimhood. In,
Yeah.
in in Freudian psychology, you are a victim of your trauma. In
Yeah.
Adlerian, you are the powerful one who has a choice to acknowledge and overcome your trauma, right?
Yeah.
And so so I really like this, but the idea here is that most, the average person has a hard time being strong, and that makes sense. It's tough to go out there and be always striving to do more,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so you end up building these groups to soothe you and to tell you, oh, no, it's not your fault, it's their fault,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes
The
it is their fault, like they are racist, and sometimes it's not their fault. You
that's
need to own up.
you need to own up actually, and this is why, Chris. I'm gonna sorry to do this to you again. This is why you got to go to jujitsu, because jujitsu is this long, multi-year process of just getting your face smashed in the mat over and over and over. But right after it gets smashed, the master comes and says, "Okay, now this is what you did wrong. I'm going to give you tools on how you're not going to get smashed again in exactly the same way." And it's like just through day after day after day of this, you get stronger, you get more capable. And I mean, I don't know that there's any other way to get there than just to intentional exposure of hard things, which is what we talked about at the very beginning when we started doing things. That let's force ourselves to do something hard and uncomfortable every single day, just so we get a little bit stronger, right? This is the problem with all these youngins right now. Is the thing is their philosophy is I need the world to change so I don't feel the impact of the world. That's one strategy. Another strategy is, dude, the world's the world. You got to get a little bit tougher. You got to get better schools. You got to thicken your skin up a little bit, but without losing the ability to love and be compassionate. And that's a lot harder skill.
So, a lot of people have really tough lives,
Yes,
right?
very tough.
I don't think they have them in our country. I don't think we have it as tough as it was like kids growing up in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, right? I think,
I don't know. No, you be careful saying that. No, no, because I don't know. No, no, let's
uh,
not say that. You say it. I'm
no,
not going to
oh
say
no,
it.
no, I'll defend that.
Yeah, okay, defend it.
I'll defend it and basically say not having enough food to eat is a big problem in society back in the 30s and the 40s,
Dude,
and
that happens
does
right
that
now. That's
that
happening right
doesn't
now.
that doesn't tend to happen at the levels it happened in the past. It's
Well, I don't
I
know the
would argue it's
scale of
less.
it, but let me tell you this: it could be less. But if you're the kid who's hungry, you're the kid who's hungry. It doesn't matter if there's one of you or a million of you, right? And I'll tell you right
So
now.
I'm talking numbers here. I'm not talking an individual person here. I'm talking
Okay, I'm
numbers here.
always going to go towards the individual, right?
And I'm always going to go
Well,
towards understanding the world and the way the world works. And so the way the world works is calories are cheaper to produce today, power is more readily available. We actually have a lot more products in our lives than we had in the past. So the
okay.
livelihood, even of someone in the poor scale, is likely better than it was in the 1930s,
Okay, so
right?
the impact is less, right?
So
As
what
a
you're going
whole,
to
from a
have,
number standpoint.
another thing we have is people not dying of the same things they died of in mass 70
Yes,
years
right.
ago or 100 years
Yeah,
ago. So
right, right, right.
the amount of deaths you experienced in your life, the amount of bad illnesses you experienced in your life, the amount of poverty you've experienced in your life has probably gone down on average for the average person. I think that is, and I would say that if I went and looked for the numbers for this, I could justify what I'm saying.
Okay, and I don't have a problem with that. I think that's good. Hopefully that's true.
So that
And we
means to
still got to
me
focus on the individual.
that means to me that the number of people, because the sheer amount of hardship in life for people in their growing years is down on a percentage basis per person. That means that you're going to have less people that have experienced those hard lives. But hard lives do two things: that you either fall apart or you grow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's probably other permutations. So there's a reasonable start. Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so what I'm saying is I think in many ways that each generation, the hardships they experience have altered to where we don't recognize what they are anymore. What are the hardships that Gen Alpha has versus Gen Z? Right? Gen Z
Well,
and a lot millennials and a lot of people, they were living through COVID during very important years of their lives.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's a generally okay from a certain logical standpoint. There's still suffering in the world, and it's true that it could the
Scott,
actual like
I'm saying
absolute.
suffering has a value in creating strong
Well,
and weak people.
it depends on what kind of suffering. It's like how much. I mean, the problem is if you want to get immune to a poison, you take a little bit at a time over a long period of time. But if you take too much, it'll kill you. So
It'll
yeah,
kill
you
you,
gotta be.
or you'll live through it and you'll come out the other end of it. I don't understand what you're arguing. I'm not saying that there is no suffering. I'm not saying suffering is ever going away. What I'm saying is I think the suffering that we've got in the world doesn't make strong people in the way we're used to seeing strong people.
I'm just arguing against you because I enjoy arguing against you. I'm just
Yeah, but I,
getting.
I want you to argue something that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me. I think what you're
I'm
saying is
not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. It's so you attack like somehow I'm saying that there's less that suffering is gone or that someone having suffering in their life is not valid anymore. And I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is the type of suffering people went through, hardships of economies, hardships of having food, hardships of health. Those types of hardships are a lot less than they used to be. So the hardships people have, like not being able to go to school and visit your friends when you were in high school or when you were in college, not being able to have a job when you graduate those places, you know, the fact that you're making less money than your parents did, the fact that you may never be able to afford buying a house, and seeing what impact that has on society and on individuals. I do wonder what are the hardships that each generation has, and how does being a strong person who comes out of that better, what does that look like?
well, I don't know. I
I
don't
would say
know.
up until the boomer generation, it was pretty much people were poor. People had sustenance lifestyles. People didn't have a lot of extra income, right? And then the birth of the middle classes or the growth of the middle classes after World War II created a whole bunch of people. Those are the boomers. Those are the kids, right? They were kids in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Those people grew in a time of massive growth. So the hardships they had were different, right? Maybe people OD'd on drugs a lot more during the 60s than they did in prior years. I don't know what it is. But I also feel like, Gen X kind of went the opposite direction of boomers, who boomers were really the hippie generation, right?
I
They're the ones
guess.
who were free love and drugs and all that kind of stuff. And so what you see is X went the other direction. They went a little more conservative than
I
them.
guess
And then
what's the point though? What's your point exactly? What's your high ground you're trying to take?
so how do we get people to become stronger when the type without better understanding the type of suffering and hardships that turn people into stronger people, and making sure that they have the tools to get through those hardships in a way where they come out stronger.
So you actually want to help people then?
At the end of the day, that's what I'm talking about. How
I
do we
like
do
it.
that?
I like it. I'm in with you. How do we do it? Well, I think we're doing it right now. I mean, so from my standpoint, the way I can help people is if I just decrease your emotion a little bit and increase your thinking a little bit more. And I want to tell you that you as an individual can work through this actually. As an individual, it might be super hard and it might be unfair, but it's possible. And so I just want to put that hope into people. Because hope is a really good thing for people.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where I want to go.
I don't want I want so maybe that's the first step. I want them to get past hope into a belief that the world is the way it is, and
Yeah.
how I feel about it doesn't change it,
Yeah, absolutely 100%. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
How I feel about it might direct how I act, and
Of
maybe
course.
my actions can impact the world. But
Yeah.
how I feel about the world. So the problem is this: the world is the way it is. I don't like it. I feel bad, so I'm going to ignore the way the world is and say it's something else. That's
Well,
not
I
a
mean,
good way to go.
that's a bad idea
That's not a
because
good way to go. Instead, the world is the way it is. How I feel about it is irrelevant. Let's recognize that. Is there something I think could be better? Is there an action I could take to make it better? Then I can decide to act.
I don't think the feelings are irrelevant. I think what you want to do is,
I well, you think
but I
you
think what you're
think
saying,
gravity cares
Justin,
about your feelings?
what's that?
You think gravity cares about your feelings?
Probably not.
So this is what I mean when I say the world is the way it is, right? We start with a hardcore laws of physics that
Yeah, yeah,
no
yeah.
matter what you feel and
Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then we start getting into the more touchy-feely aspects of things like, well, the human mind works this way, biochemicals work this way, people have feelings, some have stronger feelings, and we can get to that point where we're less certain about things, but we start with the world the way it is,
As a
right?
general rule, I'm fine with that, but as long as you mix love into it, right? Whatever that means.
What does love have to do with gravity? Are you going
You're
to love
getting
your way to not dying from falling from a 40-story building?
um no, I was talking about these people that are having hard times, and that's what I was talking about, not really gravity.
So my issue is everyone needs to acknowledge that there are things in the world that are the way they are, no matter how I feel about it,
Yes,
and
yes,
I have
yes,
got to learn to accept that in some manner.
yes,
If I can't even
absolutely.
accept that, I'm going to stay in this kind of broken state that I'm in,
Yeah, yeah, right, right. As a general
right?
line of thinking, if you take one side of thinking that I already talked about is the fact that, look, I'm this way and I'm not willing to get stronger or do any work. I need the world to change to make it easier for me. Good luck with that. You're going to have a hard life, actually, as opposed to the other person saying, man, oh man, the world sucks. It's hard, but I guess I'm going to have to figure it out. I'm going to have to toughen up. I'm going to have to learn some new skills so that I can overcome this. That's the preferred solution in my mind.
So now we go into something that is less a scientific fact and more of a social fact. Let's
Yeah,
say, 1950s America, the workforce in all of the high-paying jobs was pretty much white middle-aged men.
yeah,
All right? That is the reality. That is not about what's right or what's wrong or how I feel about that. That's
yeah,
just
right.
the way the world was.
That's just the
So,
facts. Just the
now
facts.
what's my feeling on that? That seems unfair. Okay,
It seems
got it.
unfair.
It
Yeah,
seems unfair,
it
right?
seems unfair.
So, I can then either deny that it's real, I can rail against it saying it's unfair,
Yeah,
or I could maximize what I can get out of the system, learn the system as well as possible and maximize it,
yeah, yeah,
or I could also become an activist and try to change it,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You have all those choices. Yeah, exactly.
right? And to be stuck in this idea where I don't want to try to change it because that's tough and I'm going to get yelled at if I do that.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to learn the system because I don't want to perpetuate this discriminatory system,
Yeah,
right? So what can I do? I can deny it's even real and say
yeah,
that no, that's not the way the world is.
yeah.
That's
Well,
the
if you
easy
want
one.
yeah, then you're in fantasy land. A lot of people do that. I mean,
But
and
I
some
think that's
people,
where a lot of people go. I think a lot of
yeah,
people go that way, and so they get stuck in this fantasy. And then when you come along and say, "Hey, Chris, your view of the world's wrong.
yeah,
This is the way the world is. You've kind of built this weird little bubble around yourself where that ignores this that the that white people have all the jobs in the 1950s, all the good paying jobs
yeah,
in the 1950s, and now you're attacking me
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
attacking this belief structure that I've put into play. You're attacking
yeah,
me to say I'm wrong.
yeah, yeah. Right. Well, that's common. That's identity. That's your identity actually. And here's the problem with that is that people, if you have an identity or you see yourself in a certain way, then your actions will support that identity. And here's the
It's
cool
you.
part though, Chris. That's how people work. But here's the cool part. But you also, if you change your identity, like you even talked about in Toastmasters, you create a character for yourself. That, oh, I'm this dude, I'm Captain America. Now your actions will start to change to support that belief.
Yes. So that's a tool that you can use to do that,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
very
So,
powerful tool. Yeah,
what I would like someone to do is to be able to recognize this is the way the world is. I'm not
yeah,
saying it's right. I'm saying this is the way the world is.
yeah, yeah. Well, of
My
course, yeah,
opinion,
yeah,
my opinion is that it's wrong, and I have to find a way to live in this society where I'm living in a society I think is wrong,
well, and I agree with you.
right?
To me, that's like Captain Obvious, of course, right? I mean,
But what I'm getting is getting someone to think that way, because that's the first. Then you start saying, okay, my identity isn't this fake belief that I created. My identity is I'm a person who believes that the system is wrong and that
yeah,
I should. And then, am I going to feel guilty because I'm not out there being a social justice warrior trying to make change? No, maybe it's not worth it for me to go out there and fight the fight every day to try to change the world. Maybe it is. It's going to be based upon, and then you need to be comfortable enough with yourself to say, I'm going to put up my time. I'm going to go to get arrested and go to jail and all that kind of stuff, protesting the wrongness of this. Okay, that's good. Or you know what? I got a family to take care of. I'm just going to go out and get the best job I can. And yes, I have my opinion, but I'm not going to act on it. That's
yeah,
also
yeah.
okay. That's perfectly
Yeah.
good too,
Okay, yeah, yeah,
right?
that's reasonable.
And
Yeah.
and coming to that conclusion then means that your identity is not tied to how you interpret the world. Your identity is tied to how you act, how you decided to act in the world.
Yeah, well, this is all the reason why you got to believe in God, right? Because what God does is he sets a standard for you that's a higher power that you can actually follow. And that's why it's so powerful.
So I'm going to say something
Yeah,
that occurred to me earlier this week. God is a tool. Religion is a tool.
absolutely. Of course. Yeah, yeah. Hang on just a second. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry. I just had to, my phone was dinging like crazy. Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so and so the value of religion or God is not so much whether he truly exists or not, but in the fact that it gives you a tool to use to have a framework towards a certain value structure.
Yeah,
If you agree with a
absolutely.
value structure, then living along those lines means you'll move towards something of more value.
Well, and see, that's the problem with Jordan Peterson, right? That's what Jordan Peterson does. He acts as if. So he's taking the idea of being a Christian. Oh, I like that idea, so I'm going to act as that. But there's a difference in being a Christian versus acting like one.
There's something in his head, though. The fact that he couldn't state yes or no,
Yeah,
there's something in his head that he doesn't want to say yes or no to.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
I mean, I would say, if you were to ask me that question, I go, no, but I like
yeah,
these aspects of Christianity.
yeah,
I would say
right.
that, right?
Yeah,
The fact that he's unwilling, actually, I'm wondering if he realizes that a good chunk of his audience is in fact Christian, and if he were to say no, he would get in trouble.
yeah. Well, of course, he's probably thinking all through that, actually. Yeah,
And if he
right.
says yes, then he gets tied to that side, and then he can't argue the intellectual thing anymore.
Very possibly. Yeah. Yeah. I think he's messed up significantly, actually, because he just lost all his power, right? Because now the dude's wishy-washy.
Yeah, and the idea of saying that I don't know if God exists, but I'm going to live like he does, live my life as if he does, because
Yeah.
there's value in that. That's a great thing to say to a point, but at some point, I think you've got to say, explain it, explain what's holding you back, or what, or why
Yeah.
you've decided in a particular
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And so the Bible clearly talks about this, right? And this really makes me nervous, this part of the Bible. He talks about that when you die and you're going to be judged, that there's many people who said, I follow God. God's going to reject them. He's going to like get away from me. I never knew you. And that's a pretty harsh reality if you really start to think about that. In fact, it's so interesting. I don't know. Have you listened to Chris Langley about God? He's really interesting. Um,
Chris Langley, is that the smartest
he's a
guy?
200 IQ guy, and he was
Yeah.
interviewed by, oh my gosh, what's his name? Name a few of these guys that he was interviewed by him. It's really interesting interview.
Seth Godin,
No, um,
Mark, Gladwell,
no, no,
Huberman, who
no.
Williamson, Chris
I should
Williamson.
probably tell you the name instead of making you guess, actually. I think he's a Jewish guy, right? Hang on just a second. Give me a second just to look this up. And hey, Chris, we got to wrap this up in a few minutes too.
Yeah.
Hang on, Chris. You would probably like him.
This is the guy who uses science to explain the existence of God.
No, that's another one. That's the mathematician guy. You should listen to him too. It's just very interesting. I can't find it. To me, crud. Yeah, man. He's got his podcast show. I just can't think of his name.
You said Jewish. You don't mean Ben Shapiro, right?
Not Ben Shapiro. He's another one like he looks. Sorry to make you cry. It's just he's. I'm.
Chris Knowles? No, he's not Jewish, is he? Dave Rubin? These are all the kind of right wing.
Yeah, there's one more. You're like if I was asking you to shoot a gun, you're like right around the. You're like everything except for the exact target. But he's right. It's the dude's right in that niche. Hang on, I gotta find it. And you know the other guy too, the science guy, right? I mean, I think he's an Oxford mathematician or whatever. He put some really good arguments up about God. Really interesting. Um,
Oxford mathematician?
yeah,
I don't.
he's like a big fat white guy. Here he is, Michael
Knowles?
Knows. Yeah, that's
Knowles.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Knows. It's like a 2 hour interview. Pretty interesting interview. Oh my gosh, 11 million views. So somebody's watching it.
Yeah. So the comment that what brought on him? Sorry.
Um, just how he. Oh, I think we started with basically Jordan Peterson saying, "No, I'm not a Christian," right? Basically
Yeah.
denying it. So, which means no, right? Unless you say yes, that means no. It's pretty binary decision in that case. Um,
Yeah. Well, no. What it means is he didn't want to answer the question. So he could have a reason not to answer the question that has nothing to do with whether he is or isn't.
I suppose I'm taking that as a no, right?
Right. Like if I commit to one side or the other, I lose the other side. So I'm not going to commit.
Yeah, that's like I'm gonna use the word that's chicken shit, right? That's
Sure,
horrible.
but that is a valid way to
It's a
think.
valid thing, but then what it does to me is it makes me like completely distrust
It's like
you.
if like you have a job here in California and you're working for a California company that's meeting all of the DEI stuff that California does, and someone comes and asks you a question, how do you feel about blank? And blank is something where if you answer your opinion, you're going to get fired.
Yeah, yeah, I know
Right? What
exactly.
do? You say, "Oh, I don't know about that," or "I'm not sure," or whatever. I've never really thought about that. You BS the hell out of that answer.
You BS the hell out of it, or if you have a lot of character, you say, "This is my belief, good or bad. Do what you will with it." But
Yeah, and there's a good chance you won't be around in a year's time.
possibly, yeah, very possibly, actually, yeah. But
Yeah.
for me, I'm judged by God, so
I got a lot of flack for my opinion on some of these things when my last company.
okay, there you go. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Then maybe you need a new company. I don't know actually.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But for
Well,
me, I would much rather respect somebody who just says a yes or a no, even though I disagree. But I'm like, dude, at least you took a stand, right? And I can totally respect that. I disagree with you, but you took a stand, right?
yeah, so this is where it comes down to, is it taking a stand or is it being dumb and not reading the tea leaves and acting the way you need to protect your family and to make money for them and all that stuff? I mean,
Well,
at the end of the day, there's your principles and then there's your livelihood, and you need to
yeah,
figure out which principles are worth dying for and which ones aren't,
yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. Yeah,
right?
that's a good question.
So there are some principles that you won't bend on, and there are other principles. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to shut up. You can think what you want.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Okay,
At the end of the day, I don't know what else to think. Okay.
so can we get close to wrapping it up because I need to wrap up.
Yeah. So where are we on the stuff we work? So we worked on stuff earlier this week to go over. Trying to build out content. Where are we on that?
I need to I'll probably finish it tomorrow or Sunday. I just got to put a
Okay.
couple stuff up. But before we go into this, we should probably end the podcast.
In the podcast, you just lost your lighting. Is it getting
Yeah, I
dark
know.
over there?
No,
All
the
right.
light just went off.
All right. Let's hit the stop button. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, stop. Oh, wait. Did I hit stop? No, I didn't. But before I hit stop, we should ask people to subscribe and leave comments, which we always forget to do.
Exactly.
Please subscribe. Please leave comments and let us know where we're wrong or where we're right or what else we need to talk about.
And especially
Thank you.
let Chris know where he's wrong. That's what I really want to see.
You know what? You can do it all you want. If you don't back it up with facts and logical reasoning, it don't mean nothing to me.
There we go. Okay, good for you.
All right, here we go. I'm going to hit stop.
Okay.